sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest tonight is Dontel. He's a citizen journalist. You may know him on Twitter as Unapologetic. Welcome back, Dontel. It's been a minute.
I'm glad to be back, Sabby. Ready to do it.
Yeah, no, it's been a hot minute, but you've been doing your thing. I really do appreciate a lot of your work on Substack, and that's what we're going to get into tonight. In particular, this article, guys, make sure you're following Dontel on Substack. Corporations fight Congress to keep their UFO research secret. Defense contractors and their lobbyists aren't happy with aggressive UFO disclosure laws being pushed by Congress. Now they are working behind closed doors to keep their secrets from coming out. So Dontel, I know you're really big into the UFO stuff and classified documents and all that jazz. I personally don't think that the government should keep classified documents. I think all that information should be open to the public. With this particular story about the corporations, let's get into this a little bit, because I want to know what they are trying to hide from us and why.
Right. That's a great question. So if anybody's done research into the UFO topic, you notice that there's a lot of overlap between the government and private contractors. And it's the way that they've set up this scheme basically in the government for a long time. And part of it is it allows a whole other layer of secrecy to the topic. So say all of this was just being held within the executive branch of the Department of Defense, the CIA, whatever, then there's a higher chance of somebody with higher authority just coming in and saying, hey, let me see what you have, or whatever it is. And also the way that the government does research, a lot of times they fund private corporations to do research and development for different projects. And with this, it also, like I said, it provides another layer of secrecy, because say they do have these UFO documents and they do have these crashed UFOs. It's much harder for government officials like Congress, like how they're doing these investigations now, and the Inspector General's office, they're doing these investigations now. It's much harder for them to get access to documents that are hidden in private corporations. They have a whole other legal structure that they follow, and they have their own security clearances and protocols that they follow that are completely separate from what the government have. So you might have top secret clearance and have access to different documents in the government, but if you're not cleared by a corporation, you don't get to see what they have. And if you're a private citizen and you want to know what they have, you can't really FOIA. You can't FOIA Lockheed Martin or Boeing or Raytheon or any of these other defense contractors who are accused of having these crashed UFOs and the documents in the research.
I was so glad when you sent me this article of yours, because this is another example to everyone out there watching that shows you how the corporations control the government. This is just another example, whether you believe in UFOs or not. It just goes to show you who's really running the show. I want to get to this point here. Is ATI paying lobbyists to go after UFO disclosure laws? It says right here, last year, ATI hired several lobbyists from Covington, and one in particular stands out in the context of this story. According to the financial disclosures on the Senate website, Stephanie Barna was hired to lobby for ATI's interests, specifically on the NDAA and other transactions, OT. Let's get into this a little bit here, Dontel, about the ATI.
Right. So let me first start with how I even found this newsletter, because that's what this article is mostly about. There was a newsletter posted in one of the top corporate law firms in the country and really in the world. And it was the title of it was The Implications of the UFO Disclosure Act that's in the NDAA. And so I read the newsletter, and we could get into the details of the newsletter. But I started to look into, all right, so this is from a lobbyist and a lawyer. She is a lawyer too, working at this law firm. So I wanted to see who would be paying for this work, because it's not like a lobbyist is going to just come out and like make like have their everything that they do is for their clients that's paying them. So somebody had to be paying for this specific work when it comes to the UFO Disclosure Act that was in the NDAA. So I looked through, I try to find their clients, and it's a lot harder to find the clients for the law firm because it's protected. But thankfully, because of campaign finance laws, I was able to find who was paying them for their lobbyist service. And of course, it was some of the biggest names in the defense industry, like Bay Systems and Northrop Grumman, and I believe Boeing. And then I found this seemingly like vague company that I had never heard of before. And the name of the company was Advanced Technology International. And they paid Covington over $1 million over the last couple of years for their lobbyist services. And they specifically also paid this lobbyist who wrote this newsletter. They hired her specifically. She's they're one of her clients. And so I looked into the company, and it's what's known as a consortium manager. And there's a whole there's a whole category of projects that are funded by the Defense Department that are called other transactions. And these are basically all top secret research projects, different technologies. I listed one of the projects that they help put together. Like I said, the ATI is the consortium manager, and the consortium is made up of all these different defense contractors, academic institutions, and people in different agencies and departments in the national security apparatus. That's who makes up these consortiums. And ATI, as the consortium manager, is in charge of putting these projects together and facilitating the money that's awarded, these other transactions. And if you go through their website, they facilitated billions of dollars in research, from to large defense contractors to smaller ones. One of the projects that they have on their website that they brag about is they made this directed energy weapon laser that can shoot down drones and stuff like that. So all these top secret projects that most people probably would have never heard of, they help facilitate these research projects. And so that's what ATI does. And they hired Stephanie Barna, who was she used to be like a top lawyer in the Army. She worked in the Army's prosecutor's office. She was part of the team that investigated the WikiLeaks leaked the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs originally. She later moved into the general counsel's office for the Army. And then her last job in government, she was the general counsel for the Senate Armed Services Committee. And that's very important and relevant because as general counsel for the Senate Armed Services Committee, it was her job to finalize the text and language in the NDAA, which is the funding for the Department of Defense. So ATI hired, and to give a little background on this law that they're talking about, last year, Chuck Schumer and Mike Rounds and some other senators, they introduced this UFO Disclosure Act, and it was a 64-page bill to basically force the government, all the different agencies in the government, as well as private contractors, anybody in academia who has access to UFO documents, research files, actual craft. They literally specify that in the legislation, craft that came from from unknown origins, and they specify or made by non-human intelligence. The bill also require them to hand over any bodies of the non-human intelligences that they have in their possession. So it was a very detailed and it was a very specific bill, and it also went over the purpose of why they even needed to create the law in the first place, which was that in the way they describe it, and it's been described in other documents going back decades, there's what's called a legacy program where, like I mentioned before, academia, some like a small group in the intelligence community, people in the Department of Defense, like a small group of them, and also private contractors, they are basically running these secret UFO programs, and they're keeping them from Congress, keeping them from the president, and basically stealing money to fund the program and doing all types of criminality to keep it running.
Well,
So,
I remember when that legislation was brought to the floor. I remember a lot of people were happy about that on both sides, that they're like, yeah, we need to have this information. But then I feel like it just kind of went away. Like we didn't hear about it as much anymore after that, it seemed like.
right. And it did pass the Senate the way it was, and all 64 pages, and then it went to the House, and that's when I believe the lobbyists got a hold of it, and they took out a lot of the key parts of the bill, because there was supposed to set up like a disclosure panel that was supposed to review all the documents and publish them, declassify all of them, and they were supposed to have subpoena power. They were able to go to a court and get subpoenas for documents and testimony and things like that. So it was when it went to the House, and the irony is, the representative in the House that was leading the charge to gut the bill was Mike Turner, who's the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and he represents the district where Wright-Patterson Air Base is, which is another important base when it comes to UFO research. They've been said to have bodies and craft and materials and doing research and things like that for a very long time, for decades. So it's ironic that that's the congressman who led the charge in removing all those important pieces from the legislation. Now to ATI, so they paid Stephanie Barna and these other lobbyists to lobby on their behalf on the NDAA. And so basically her whole role there at Covington and Burling is to lobby for defense contractors on the NDAA and other government contracts for weapons and equipment and things like that. So, and you can look through, as I did, all the other work that she's published on the law firm's like newsletter. They're all related to the NDAA. So clearly, this is what she's getting paid for. Those are the topics that her clients are paying her for. So it was the amount of coincidences for this company, ATI, that facilitates billions of dollars in top secret government research, that they have connections to literally every single defense contractor you could think of. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, all of them. And they paid Stephanie Barna, who used to write the NDA, and now she's putting out this newsletter talking about the UFO disclosure law that's in the NDAA. So it's way too many coincidences for there to be nothing there. And then you get into the specifics of what was in the newsletter. Clearly, she's advocating on behalf of her clients who have this material and who have these documents, and they don't want it to come out to the public.
Mm-hmm. This is very important because I think that another thing that you mentioned too about how the lobbyists were able to remove certain items from legislation. This is another thing. This is why I continue to tell people that our representatives, they don't represent us. They're supposed to, but they actually work for the lobbyists. They work for corporations. They answer to those people. And honestly, if we had a real democracy, lobbyists should not be able to touch any piece of legislation or recommend that anything is removed from any piece of legislation. They should not be involved in this process at all, but they are. And I wanted you guys to hear about this so that you understand how sometimes, even if a piece of legislation passes, certain things may be removed from it, not because politicians did it willingly or wanted to do it first, but because lobbyists told them to do it. So this is very important for people to understand. That's very suspect, Dontel.
Yeah, and so for me, like, one of the reasons why this is such was an important topic for me to write about this specific newsletter is, one, it's kind of admitting that from the lobbyists of these defense contractors, and you know how people like to say, oh, it's all a psyop and it's a distraction, everything like that. They had absolutely this clearly wasn't like meant to deceive the public. This was buried in their corporate newsletter. And really the only people who would see it are their clients and people in the defense industry who were to read their newsletter, because they have a bunch of other updates about deadlines for reporting and new policies and new legislation that affect defense contractors and things like that. So it's literally meant for people in the industry. And with the way it reads is incredibly candid. So they're admitting that some of these defense contractors, not only they have these materials that they don't want to make public, they're coming up with strategy behind the scenes to impact policy to keep it that way. And so for me, that's a big part of it. But also, I want people in this space to understand that there is there clearly, and I've done a lot of research over the last year, and I've produced many documents, declassified documents from decades ago, going back to the 40s, that prove that the government is not only researching this topic, and they have incredible amounts of stuff that they haven't made public, but also so many people are so in this space, they're so convinced that there's nothing to see here that they're going to allow all of this to take place basically behind closed doors with absolutely no input from the public. And I don't think that's right. I do think we should have a say in how this happens, how disclosure happens. Because at this point, it's literally like the best way you can interpret the situation. There's factions of the government who want some disclosure, but they don't want to tell people everything. You have the defense contractors who don't want to tell people anything. And then there's also another faction in the government who don't want to tell people anything, people involved in this program. So and then the politicians in between. So basically, if you're so convinced there's nothing to this that you don't even want to look into it, you don't want to share any of these developments with your audience, you are quite literally saying, if this is all true, and I believe it is, because just the amount of evidence is overwhelming at this point. If you believe that this is true, and there is a non-human intelligence interacting with the planet, and these UFOs are here, and the government has possession of them, you're basically saying it's up to them, all of these corrupt people who have their own interests and their own motivations, to decide what the public knows, and just like how much they know. If they're going to tell people 10%, 20%, 30%, you're allowing them to make all these decisions in secret with absolutely no input. So that's why I think this story was so important.
That's true, because my big thing is, and I know you feel this way too, again, I don't think that there should be classified documents. I think that the American people have a right to know what our government is doing, what they're researching. I mean, this also goes back to, the JFK, his death as well. Remember, there was a lot of conversation around this a couple of months ago, actually more so last year, where they were saying, okay, we're going to declassify these documents. I'm like, I don't think there should be classified information. I don't think this information should be kept from the American people. If they feel there's something out there that they are researching or something that is important, obviously they think it's important if they're doing the research on it, then we should have a right to know about it. And that's the part that it drives me crazy, because I always wonder, like, what else is there? And I know some people just think like, oh, well, who cares about unidentified flying objects? It's not a big thing, not a big deal, or it's not real or whatever. We don't know. We don't really know if it's real or not. Like, and even if it is, like, the point is they're doing the research and they're not telling us about it. And then you have the lobbyists and the corporations that have the control over the politicians, and they're telling them, even though that legislation passed, they're still telling them what they can tell us and what they can't tell us.
Right. And like in the newsletter that Stephanie Barner wrote, they specifically mentioned parts of the legislation that their clients are objecting to, which was like it would give the government eminent domain over all UFO materials, the craft, the bodies, the research, all of that stuff. And so, in the way that the law was written, all of the documents, that basically everything that is older than 2000, older than the year 2000. So, like, if it was produced in 1940 all the way to 1999, it's automatically declassified. And the only exception would be is if the president personally went, and there was, like I said, there's supposed to be a panel set up. They brought this specific document, like they can't just do a blanket national security exception. They have to cite this specific document and the specific reason why they don't want it to be released for whatever national security excuse they come up with. And I personally don't agree with that exceptions and all that bullshit anyway. But that's the way that the law was written, that the president could make an appeal to keep a specific document classified for another 7 years or something like that. And one of the points of contention that Stephanie Barna brought up was that defense contractors, they wouldn't have the ability to redact certain things or to keep certain things secret. And so she was advocating that if you are in that category of people who have this material, you should approach whoever you're working with in government on this research and have them put in exceptions so that you can make your own redactions. And so you could make your own, like, keep certain documents from being made public. So, like you said, they abuse the classification system, which is like, and you talk about, so why is the UFO topic important? There's so many different reasons why it's important, but it gets to the heart of the whole national security state. There are unelected people who are, like you said, abuse the classification system, and anything that exposes crimes of the government, anything that embarrasses them, if you show how they've been, like on this topic specifically, show that they've been lying and they've been active disinformation campaigns and active psyops to mislead the public on this topic, and all that comes out, it makes them look bad. So they hide it all behind redactions and security classifications and things like that. And that's fundamentally not how a democracy is supposed to work. The people are supposed to have access to the information so that we can make our own decisions and decide how the government is supposed to run on any given issue. But on this issue and any other issue, they use these blanket national security justifications to keep all this stuff away from the public. And this is one of the most egregious topics I would say they do it on. And also, like, just in general, how this topic relates to people. So if this technology exists, and like I said, there's plenty of documents and evidence that says it does, then that means somewhere there's there's some technology using free, clean, renewable energy, and they've been doing it for a very long time. And apparently the government has access to this technology. So again, if this exists, and one of the reasons why they'd want to keep it secret is because it would disrupt the energy industry if it does come out that they have this free and renewable energy source. So they use it, like I said, they use the classification system to protect the power structures as it is. So it's just fundamentally, like I said, against what democracy is supposed to be. And I do think if that this, and for any number of other reasons, this should be declassified. The people should be able to decide what they want to do with this information. And I strongly am against this cover up and this attempt to move away from the cover up by the very same people who've been initiating it and carrying out for the last 80 years. I don't think that they should decide whatever technology, and part of the why these corporations want to keep this secret is to protect their profits and their patent rights. So like I said, I don't agree with that at all.
Plus, if people found out about that, then that would hurt corporations big time, right? Like that could hurt if people knew that existed. Like that would, like you said, it would not be profitable. And the corporations, they're looking out for their own pockets and how they can make more money. And God forbid if that were to get out and people find out, oh my God, it looks like there may be clean, renewable energy, then what the hell are we paying for it for?
Exactly. It would affect eliminate poverty around the world. It would, you're concerned about climate change and pollution and global warming and things like that. I don't see a better a solution. The problems keep getting worse. So it's so funny to me that, because one of the reasons why I started doing my show in general was I was learning so much about how the world actually works and the corruption and how corporate profits basically drives everything. And so I felt like the more people who know this information, the better chance there is that something will change. And then you have this one issue, this one topic where not only, and again, something that I didn't mention before, but so if we do have access to free renewable energy, so a lot of these wars about oil and stealing natural resources, it becomes unnecessary. So you have this issue that gets to can address the issue of poverty and pollution and the war machine. And it's like so many people are just so stubborn and unwilling to even look into it. It just blows my mind, because even like you said, say it's not true. I mean, say it is true. Why is it? Why would you be so against even looking into the topic? Even if there's a small chance that it is true, and all of the giant implications that come along with it, I think it's worth looking into. And I've never gone out and said, you know what, everybody, you have to believe me, these UFOs are real. But my main push has been over the last month, and challenge to new media has been, what would it take for you to even just do some research into it, to cover the topic? I'm not saying you have to believe it.
Right.
But what would it take for you to say, you know what, maybe there's something to look into. Maybe we should do some more research. Maybe whatever it is that they're trying to keep secret, we should try to uncover it so that the public knows. And I just think it's a huge missed opportunity in this space.
I 100% agree with what you're saying there. And I want to finish it up with this. And I think there's one question for you, Dontel, but this part right here: lobbyists and politicians are making decisions for the public. And this is what it really hits home. This is what I like about your work on Substack, Dontel, because I feel like you always tie it all together at the end of the article, what people really need to be focusing on. So again, Whether you believe in UFOs or not is beside the point. The point that Dontel's trying to make in this article is, he says, earlier I mentioned the raging debate about whether or not UFOs are real going on among the general public. While that's happening, the military industrial complex and their lobbyists are throwing their weight around to manipulate the most important development in human history in a way that best serves their corporate interests, prioritizing corporate profits, covering up possible crimes committed, or anything in between. The objectives of the war machine have never been aligned with those of the public. So this is the point to hit home, folks. Lobbyists and politicians are making decisions for the public. And that's what I think everybody needs to take from this. And that's not okay. Like, we have no say so. And I was thinking about what you said about the clean, renewable energy that's free. You know, that would change things. That would change the U.S. relationship in the Middle East. Think about that. Think about how that could change our relationship with Saudi Arabia and Israel.
Yeah, it would literally be the biggest story of in human history when this comes out. So all I ask is, and anybody who's in your audience, anybody watching this, just do the basic research. Just try to find. There's so many different areas that you can dig into, because, like I said, I think that this is something that the public should decide. I think we all should get access to all the information. And I don't see how you can really disagree with that, because clearly they're keeping something secret. Clearly they're covering something up. And they're not hiring lobbyists to change these UFO disclosure laws for no reason. They're not going to one of the most expensive corporate law firms just to have them change or gut a UFO disclosure law if they don't have these materials. So I get that this is a very hard topic to wrap your mind around. And trust me, before I even started writing about it, before I even did a video about it on my channel, it took me weeks and months of just going like internally with myself. Is this bullshit? Is there something there? And honestly, you just have to put out the biases that you already have and just follow the evidence. And like I said, there's plenty of evidence. Whistleblower testimony from decades ago, declassified documents. I talked about the Kona Blue proposal from the Department of Homeland Security, which was a 56-page proposal for a program where the entire purpose of it was to do an inventory of all the crashed UFOs in the government possession and in possession of defense contractors. This is from 2011. So and it was incredibly detailed. There's so much to look into. And so it's so funny to me when people say there's no evidence. There's plenty of evidence. You might want to see the inside of a UFO. I want to see that too. But that shouldn't be the only thing that counts as evidence. Because in any other scenario, if you had as many documents as I found, that counts as evidence. If you had as many people telling a consistent story for 80 years, that counts as evidence. And one more thing, I want to just end on this. It is the double standard that some people have when it comes to accepting some stories that come from sources in the national security state as opposed to other. Because one of the main pushbacks on this is that it's coming from sources in the national security state. And I agree that you should be skeptical and you should look for confirmation other than what people say. But look at like how people treated the article from Seymour Hersh when he wrote about the Nord Stream pipeline explosion. I agree with his assessment, and I think that's the best, most accurate version of events. But nobody was saying, I'm not going to believe this article. Seymour Hersh, where's the documents? Because that entire article was based on an anonymous source in the intelligence community. But everybody cited it, and nobody had an issue with it because it logically made sense. The available evidence that we have from the public statements from government officials saying they wanted to take out the Nord Stream pipeline and celebrating it, and everything, the fact that it was an almost impossible operation for anybody to do outside of the CIA, all of those other context clues and evidence, people were able to put together and conclude that even though this story came from an anonymous source in the intelligence community, there's supporting evidence there to make it a valid story. So I just want people to remove their bias on this and follow the evidence. Don't just take my word for it. Follow the evidence. That's all I want to say on that.
All right. And there's one question here for you, Dontel, from a kid. Thank you for this, a kid. Hi, Sabby. Salute for having Dontel on the show. We missed you, kid. Ask him about Bob Lazar. Are you familiar with Bob Lazar, Dontel?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Bob Lazar's story. And so definitely everything that's happened over the last couple years has made like added validity to his story. There have been other people, like even at the time when he said he was working at Area 51, and then his whole story about how he thought they were going to force him out of the program and kill him or whatever. So he brought people out to where they were doing these UFO testing. So he had multiple people out there, actually, because they had these schedules or whatever when they would do flight tests and things like that when there was a lower chance of people seeing them in the public, like on like a Wednesday night when traffic was low or something like that. So he brought people out, and he had witnesses out there looking at UFOs right when he said that they would. So, and there's other documents like his W-2 from that said he worked at Area 51, and just other things in his story that have, and the funny thing about it, so he's somebody who's had a sketchy past, but it's important to follow the details of what he's telling and try to confirm it in other ways, and that's what I've done. And I can't say 100% that Bob Lazar is telling the truth, but this will be such an incredible lie with so much small details to support what he's saying that it like I said, at some point with the same thing with this topic in general, at some point you just have to believe your lying eyes. And even though it's an incredible story, there's not that much to disprove it. So that's my take on Bob Lazar. And there's some people trying to have him come and testify to Congress and tell his story, and I agree with that. I definitely think he should do that, and they should definitely investigate his story as well as any of the other witnesses who, at this point, there's over 40 witnesses who have gone to the Inspector General and said that they've been involved in this program and they've directly worked on these craft. So all of their story should be investigated, and I don't think it should be investigated in secret as they've done so far. I think it should be all public. All the evidence that they brought and the documents, photographs, videos, I don't think any of it should be classified and done in secret as they've been doing. I think it should all be public.
All right, Dontel, thank you so much. Before you go, where can people find you and follow your work?
You can follow me on Substack. The link to that is in my Twitter. On Twitter, you could find me at unapologetic.yt for my YouTube channel, because that's why I made it. You can find me on YouTube at Unapologetic. And yeah, I'm going to be doing more work on this topic and other topics. So thank you so much for having me on, Sabby. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Dontel. Take care.
You too.
Bye. All right, guys. That was Dontel. Again, citizen journalist. Dontel was probably one of the the first. Wait, he was on the first. I think Dontel came on the very first live stream that I did on this channel when it was, that was quite a doozy because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to do a live stream at that point. I was only doing like uploads. So yeah, Dontel does really great work. Again, you can follow his Substack here. And he's written a lot of articles that I find very informative. He was the one that wrote that article that explained just how much money Bernie Sanders got during his 2020 campaign, and it really put things into perspective for me and made me think, like, why are we wasting money this way? You know, so he does a lot of research. So definitely follow him there. But again, follow him on Twitter, and then you'll get his links to everything else as well. Awesome stuff. we have a right to know what our government is doing. That's just how I feel about that. All right, guys, we do have quite a bit to discuss tonight. Quite a bit of stories. Oh my God. We got a lot of stories to discuss, but we're going to get there. We're going to get there. Let's go ahead first and foremost, give a shout out to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support and holding the fort down. You're doing the damn thing, being reals. All right. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters. One day I'm going to find a way to make this pretty, you guys, I promise. Don't forget about those Sabbies. Holding down the fort. Holding down the fort. We're going to make that up. We can make that into a country song. And of course, members. Holding down the fort. I'm just holding down the fort. All right. And I want to give a shout out to a new Sabby patron. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Nyabingi Kuti. I hope I said that correctly. Nyabingi Kuti. Thank you so much and welcome. What's up? What's up? What's up? All right. And what else are we discussing tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Let's go ahead and show that thumbnail. For some reason, it feels like I'm at an angle. I don't know if I accidentally bumped my camera or not, or maybe it's just me. I don't know. It could just be this chair. All righty. What else are we discussing tonight, ladies and gentlemen? This is a big one. Democrats panic as Biden dips in New York. And this is probably going to be the big shock. Actually, maybe not. No, I think this is going to be the big shocker of tonight. And I will give a public apology to Cool Blue, because Cool Blue came on to the Sabby after show and predicted this, and Cool Blue was correct. So I will give a public apology to Cool Blue. Oh, there's Cool Blue there. What's up, Cool Blue? What's up? Cool Blue's like, I heard that, fam. I heard that. We're also going to discuss Ben Shapiro is confronted. Yikes. Confronted while he is at Congress. Ben Shapiro did appear to testify in front of Congress, and he was greeted by protesters. We're going to get into that. We're also going to discuss what he was there to testify about. It's pretty hypocritical. We're also going to discuss AOC loses endorsement. Okay, this may be the second biggest story of the night, because I don't think anybody saw this coming. And I do know that there's another story about AOC with the articles of impeachment. I think I'm going to cover that tomorrow night, because I do think that this story has not been covered by a lot of people. I think Kit may have covered it this morning. I think Nico covered it, but I think this story has kind of, slipped under people's radar. And I want to give a shout out to Dave, because Dave was the one who sent me the statement. So that's how I found out about it. So we're going to get into all of that. And we're also going to discuss Netanyahu orders Gazans to leave. This is a really big story coming out of the Middle East, obviously Israel and Gaza here. And we're going to talk about these more recent developments and how Israel is just becoming even more unhinged. It's crazy. It's wild. But we got to make sure that we get into that. All right, let's go to some of the comments here first. Miguel, what's up? Biden called Zelensky President Putin, and now he just called Kamala Vice President Trump. Look, Biden is done, fam. Biden is done. We'll get into all of it. Let's give a shout out to Rachel for becoming a Sabby member. Give Rachel a big whoop, 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 whoop to Rachel. Thank you for the super chat, Old Crow. Sabby, thanks for bringing our brother on. I honestly found you all due to coverage of UAP in the Hill with Brianna. As a former SCIF worker, it's lots of lies and misinformation hid under defense. Protect Old Crow, you guys. Protect Old Crow. And Skylar says, exactly, something is being kept from us. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. And I feel like Hollywood has been trying to hint towards this for the longest time. Right? People just say, oh, it's just a movie. Not always. Let's get that comment on Rockfin, Eric, and we'll dive into our next story. All right. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin. JVB says, thanks, Sabby and Dontel. Eye-opening. Yeah. Boop, 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 boop. Okay. If you are just joining and you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. I think we're at 109K now. Yeah, we're on the move, fam. We're on the move. Okay. This story coming out of Israel was probably one of the most devastating stories that I heard over the past couple of days. And I've been waiting to cover this because it just goes to show you that Israel needs to be stopped. Like, this has gone further than I could have even imagined. This is absolutely ridiculous what they are doing to the Palestinian people. Now it appears that Israel is ordering Palestinians to leave Gaza City. Obviously, they have nowhere else to go. Now, this is supposed to be, I guess, the final push for them to go in and try to take out Hamas. As I've said this before multiple times, you know, taking out Hamas would mean taking out an ideology. It's not just about taking out like people that are a part of that movement. The ideology still lives on. And I don't think that's something that can ever be removed, particularly since Israel has been committing this genocide against the Palestinian people. I do not think that this is something that the Palestinian people who are still alive are ever going to forget, you know? So there's that. Let's get into this clip here from Al Jazeera. This is very damning news. Israel telling Palestinian people that they have to leave Gaza City.
Now, Israeli forces dropped leaflets ordering Palestinians in Gaza City to move south, saying the area remains a dangerous combat zone. Israeli snipers were targeting people who tried to leave. In central Gaza, a strike on a home near Nusayrat refugee camp killed 4 Palestinians. The injured were taken to the already overwhelmed Al-Aqsa hospital in Deir al-Balah. At least 14 Palestinians have been killed across the strip so far on Wednesday.
And I want to add something here as well. There was also another school that was attacked, that was hit by Israel. And I can't show the video footage on here, obviously, but there were kids that were playing, football, we call it soccer, but there were kids playing football outside, like right at the school. That was supposed to be a safe space. Of course, they're still hitting safe spaces. And that school was also hit, direct hit.
All right, let's just... We're going to go over to our correspondent, Hamda Salhout, who joins us from Amman in Jordan, because Israel has banned Al Jazeera from reporting inside Israel. So, Hamda, let me just clarify what's happened, and then I'll ask you the question. So, we had these leaflets, as you know, dropped that started with, to residents of Gaza City, here are the safe corridors, and ended with, Gaza City is a danger zone. Now media reports, Israeli media reports, saying, well, not all of Gaza City was ordered to evacuate according to what they've understood from the Israeli military. What is the Israeli military saying then?
Well, the Israeli military around 9 a.m. released a statement saying that they're continuing operations in northern Gaza, specifically in Gaza City, saying that they, quote, created what they called safe corridors for Palestinians to evacuate from there, as they had what they also called, quote, targeted operations in northern Gaza. But the leaflets that were dropped to residents in the north clearly say to the residents of Gaza City in its entirety on the map, and it maps them out, telling them where to go, where these so-called safe passages and corridors are, heading south to Deir al-Balah. This is the second time a notice like this has been dropped on Gaza City. Previously, it was in October. But now we're hearing from Israeli military sources who are saying that this, in fact, was not an evacuation order for all of Gaza City, but rather specific areas where the Israeli army is still operating and where they...
Pause for a second, because I want to point something out here that I think could be missed. If the operation is only taking place in northern Gaza, and Israel, the IDF, Netanyahu have continued to tell Western media that Hamas is using the Palestinian people as human shields. Well, we all know that the Palestinian people, where were they pushed, right? They're all in the southern part of Gaza. A lot of them in the Rafah area, right up against that Egyptian border. So if it is true that Hamas is using the Palestinian people as shields, why would they be in the northern part of Gaza hiding? They would be among the people, right? So let me tell you what I think is going on. I believe the very first report that I saw, which is where they told all the Palestinian people in Gaza that they had to leave. I think that there was a lot of, anger towards that call. And there may have been some pressure there towards the IDF. And I think that's why now Netanyahu's administration is trying to change that and say, oh, we're just talking about the people that are in the northern part of Gaza, just that area. That's all. No, because the very first report that I read about this, it was telling all the Palestinian people in Gaza that they had to leave, knowing these people have nowhere to go. This is the final stage of the ethnic cleansing in Gaza. And what they can say now is, well, we gave them the leaflets, we told them to leave, knowing they have nowhere to go. Or it is to push them, and I'll show you the map, push them into another area, which is even more, a smaller area than where they are now. And that area is going to be even more densely packed because it's more people pushed in there. And then all it would take is just a certain number of weapons to hit that area and they could knock most of them out. And that's the plan, is what I believe. I believe that's what they want to do. They're trying to get those that are in other camps to basically consolidate into one tight area. So if they were to attack that area, and they'll just say that Hamas was using those people as human shields, then that'll be their way of getting rid of all of them. That's what I really believe. I don't believe Israel is trying to do the right thing here by saying, oh, we're just talking about that one part of Gaza, and that's why we're dropping off these leaflets to warn them. I don't believe that for one bit.
Do want to conduct what they're calling targeted and precise operations. Now let's talk about what the Interior Ministry in Gaza is saying. They're saying that if anyone is in any sort of immediate danger, to go to an area where perhaps is less dangerous, but they're stressing that there's still no safe place for Palestinians in Gaza. Time and time again, these Palestinians have been displaced with simply nowhere to go. The Israeli army continuously dropping these leaflets with several evacuation orders planned for them to go to designated safe areas that we have seen also repeatedly bombarded in the last 9 months. So while all of the headlines have been saying that the Israeli army has issued an evacuation order for all of Gaza City, now these sources are coming out and saying it's actually just these small particular areas that the Israeli military is still going to operate in. But the leaflet, again, was quite clear, saying to all of the residents of Gaza City, in addition to that, at the end of it, it says that Gaza City is a dangerous combat zone and no one should be there anyway. So mixed messaging here from the Israeli army, and sources that are coming out against that messaging entirely.
I don't think it's a mixed message. I want to be very clear here. And let's just understand that Al Jazeera can't even report in Israel anymore because Israel pushed them out. That's why I believe Israel also killed as many journalists as they could, because they wanted to prevent the source of information from getting out. But the reality is, I don't believe this was a mixed message. I believe this was intentional. And I would hope that Al Jazeera would believe that as well. There's no mixed message. This is just Israel trying to cover its ass, because the first order that I read, it said all the Palestinians in Gaza had to evacuate Gaza. Now they're trying to come back, and now they're trying to say we were just referring to the northern part of Gaza City, where they're not supposed to be anyway. So you guys see what's happening here? Now, I want to show you the article because there's a map, and I want to show you what it shows on this map, because this is just absolutely ridiculous. It says that Palestinians told to leave Gaza City as Israel steps up offensive. What's going on here? The Israeli military told all Palestinian civilians to leave Gaza City and head south on Wednesday as it stepped up military offensive in the territory that has killed dozens of people over the past 48 hours. The evacuation order carried out by dropping leaflets urging all those in Gaza City to take two safe routes south to the area around the central town of Deir al-Balah came after a series of deadly strikes over the past 2 days in other parts of Gaza. Now, remember, I just told you that there was another attack on a school. The kids were outside on the courtyard at the school playing football. And there was no warning to those kids, right? There was no leaflet that was dropped. It goes on to say, on Tuesday, this is the school, an airstrike on the entrance of a school turned shelter in southern Gaza killed at least 31 people, including 8 children. Footage broadcast by Al Jazeera showed children playing football in the school's yard when a sudden boom shook the area, prompting shouts of a strike, a strike. The Israeli military said it was reviewing reports that civilians were harmed. It said the incident occurred when it struck with precise munition a Hamas fighter who had taken part in the October 7 raid on Israel that precipitated the Israeli assault on Gaza. So again, do we have any evidence of that? Because the number of times that Israel says that they've taken out like certain leaders, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Hamas, do they ever show any evidence that that was the case? I don't even see the US government ask them for any evidence to show that. The area hit was crowded at the time of the attack. See, this is what they do. They get them all together. Once they're bundled up in a crowd, that's when they strike, because that way they can kill more people. The area was was crowded at the time of the attack. Wednesday's attack was the 4th on near schools sheltering displaced Palestinians in 4 days. Israel has said that in every instance, the sites were targeted because they were being used as bases by Hamas fighters, police officers, or politicians. So again, do you guys see this? If the operation is taking place, in northern Gaza, like this does not make any sense. Now I want to show you where these attacks have happened. We're going to look at this. The Holy Family School on Sunday. It says senior Hamas official and 3 others killed in a church-run school, according to Gaza Defense Agency. Right there. So here's Gaza City, and there's where the Holy Family School was, that red dot there at the top. As we scroll down, on Saturday, 16 were killed at the UNRWA school. Remember, we talked about that. Okay. So again, watch this. Over here, Deir al-Balah is the expanded humanitarian area. This is the light yellow here. There's Khan Yunis below. And then there's also the IDF designated humanitarian area here, which is the dark yellow. And right here is Rafah. So Tuesday, it says at least 31 people were killed in a tent camp outside the school. What this map shows you is that Israel they've had strikes in the southern part of Gaza, which is where they were supposed to be safe. Palestinians were supposed to be safe. So they struck the southern part of Gaza there, tent camp outside the school. Also, if we go up to the northern part of Gaza, they were also striking the UNRWA school, which was right here on Saturday. And then further up, the Holy Family School right here in the northern part of Gaza. The reason why I wanted to show you this map is to prove to you that Israel is striking the whole thing, whether it's northern Gaza, whether it's central Gaza, whether it's southern Gaza. Israel has been hitting every area. I'm telling you this because it explains that there is no safe spot for the Palestinian civilians. Where are they supposed to go? And this is what I said before. What do you mean evacuate? So let's say they evacuate. They said Gaza City now. So let's say they evacuate whoever's left there, Gaza City, and they would obviously come into one of the humanitarian areas. So let's say they came here. Now you're talking about have an even more dense area because you're trying to push all these people into this small space. And I believe, this is my belief, I believe they are trying to push them all into one small space so they can do a couple of strikes and kill all of them. That's what I believe, because the reality is the Egyptian border is right here next to Rafah. Egypt is not going to let them in. They can't go out into the ocean. They can't go this way out of Gaza. This is Israel. And they can't go to Egypt. They are literally like boxed in. This is a mess. It goes on to say here, further Israeli strikes in early hours of Wednesday morning killed at least 20 Palestinians. Associated Press reported that 12 people had been killed in the Nasiriyah refugee camp and 8 at the home of Deir Abala, an area that is located within the humanitarian safe zone, where Israel has told Palestinians to seek refuge. So let's go back up to that map. So here's Deir Abala. So as you can see, this is in the pale yellow area, the expanded humanitarian zone. So once again, Israel is still striking in the refugee camps that are supposed to be safe, the humanitarian areas, the northern part of Gaza, the southern part of Gaza, the schools, whether it's UNRWA school or not, they're striking everywhere. This is a full-on scale ethnic cleansing. There is no safe spot in Gaza. And I'm tired. I want people to stop saying that. Say it with me. There is no safe spot in Gaza. They are trying to kill these people. If you saw the interview that I covered with Aaron Mate on Piers Morgan, it was very clear that one of the guys that was on the panel, the rabbi, what did he say? He told you he was totally happy and fine with Israel annexing the West Bank. Hamas is not in the West Bank. So they want them gone. And some of the things that have been said, it's absolutely disgusting to hear that guy say, yeah, good, we can get them all out, get rid of them, get rid of all of them. And then we get to select and choose which Arabs can live in Gaza. If that isn't full on supremacy, I don't know what it is. And more people need to call that out. I know a lot of times people are like, oh, it's just a debate on Piers Morgan show. But if you listen to what people are saying on those debates, it's very important to hear. There is no safe space in Gaza. But there is something that you can do, because Netanyahu is scheduled to come to DC July 24th. And they're letting this guy have everything I've just shown you on the show. They're letting him come speak to Congress and ask for more money to continue killing people. This was never about Hamas. They've been killing Palestinians and imprisoning them and torturing them long before October 7th. Hamas was their convenient excuse. Then we hear the story that was reported by Haaretz, which is now admitting that Israel implemented the Hannibal Directive on October 7th, which would mean that they ordered the IDF to kill their own people to avoid capture, which is what some of the independent media journalists tried to tell people after October 7th. And they were called all types of names and everything, but they turned out to be right. And once again, corporate media was wrong. July 24th, get on the bus to Washington, D.C. When war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu comes to D.C. on July 24th, we will mobilize and issue a notice of a citizen's arrest. This is hosted by Answer Coalition. Answer Coalition's doing the damn thing. Get on a bus to D.C., surround the Capitol, arrest Netanyahu, July 24th, 11 a.m. They also have buses. Don't have a way to get there? They have buses. They'll probably have more cities too as we get closer to the date. They're pretty good about this. You can get on a bus in Albany, Boston, Bronx, Brooklyn, Charlotte, Chicago, Cincinnati, Columbus, Ohio, Londonderry, New Hampshire. I was surprised to see Londonderry on here in New Hampshire. I was like, damn. Londonderry, New Hampshire, Manhattan, Mount Pelier and Brattleboro in Vermont, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Providence, Rhode Island, Queens, New York. Those are the locations listed for right now. So if you go to Answer Coalition's site, that's how you can sign up to get a bus ticket or to find or register for a bus. If you need a bus, you don't have to take the bus, but something has to be done here. This is a mess. And the majority of our representatives support it or voted for it. And he's coming here. There aren't enough words that I can really say anymore about how disgusting this is. And to see that all of our politicians that are bought and paid off to just shrug it off. The same people who want to talk to you about we need to protect marginalized groups in this country. Those same people have no problem with oppressed people in Gaza being killed. Those same people, the same people who are trying to fearmonger you about Project 2025. And don't get me wrong, JB and I went over that earlier tonight on RBN. We went through Project 2025. It's not good. It is bad, but it's also already been happening. If you go through all the policies, you'll see it's already been implemented. They've been doing this. They've been doing Project 2025 for years. They just didn't call it that. They're trying to fearmonger you about that. And the videos that are posted says it's going to target minority groups. They're going to come after people who are oppressed. But those same politicians are totally fine with Israel killing and oppressing and occupying people in Gaza and the West Bank. The politicians are bought. The politicians are paid for. And to be honest with you, the majority of them don't care about no damn human rights. They care about their career. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat. Jay, heads up, Dems are distracting with Project 2025. Yeah, and I've been noticing it. Well, they even have celebrities doing it now. They had Taraji P. Henson. They had her like promoted during the BET Awards. And I'm like, what is this? Anything to keep your eye off of Gaza. Don't stop talking about Gaza. That's what they want you to do. They're trying to distract you with so many other things so that you can forget a genocide is taking place. Skylar says, shout out to the Black Palestinians like the Red Crescent worker, showing love to all Palestinians. But a lot of folks don't know there are Black Palestinians who have been there for generations too. That is true. Thank you for that, Skylar. Thank you, Phyllis. Thank you, Sabby, for your brilliant work. I so appreciate your political insights and clarity. You've become my most trusted go-to YouTube channel. Oh, thank you. That is very sweet. I am flattered. I am very flattered. Ani, please, peeps in the U.S., go protest on that day. Frank, the U.S. needs a massive revolution. This system has to change. Yeah, I keep feeling like we're almost getting there. I really do. I feel like economically, you know what it is though. I don't think it's going to be war that drives people like over the edge. I think it's going to be economics. I really do. Oh, thank you for the super chat. IHLS. Watch our politician clap Netanyahu. Shame on them. They're all sold out. All right. I think we're going to move on to our next story. I'm doing pretty good on time, so bear with me. Okay. So the big buzz that's happening politically this week is that a lot of people, more so Democrat politicians and, of course, corporate media pundits, have been forthcoming about telling Joe Biden that he needs to step down. Now, many of us, warned people about this years ago. I warned people about it during the 2020 Democrat primary debates that Joe Biden didn't seem to have it all upstairs. And I didn't think it was a good idea for people to be pushing Joe Biden. But here we are. Here we are. Now, James Carville, Nancy Pelosi, actually, we'll save Nancy for a little bit later. James Carville, I believe, Matt, Senator Bennett. Yeah. Okay. So James Carville, Senator Bennett. We'll get into the George Clooney thing. A number of people are coming forward to say that Joe Biden should step down. It seems as though all of a sudden some of Biden's most trusted people are turning their back on him. What a shame. First, we're going to start off with the Crypt Keeper himself, James Carville, coming out of the gate, letting people know this is not going to work.
Quoting now, "Mark my words," Carville said, "Joe Biden is going to be out of the 2024 presidential race, whether he's ready to admit it or not." James Carville joins us along with CNN political commentator Jamal Simmons, who served as deputy assistant to President Biden and communications director to Vice President Harris. James, do you stand still by what you said, or do you think President Biden has survived this crisis?
Well, I mean, Cook moved 6 states away from Democrats. I watch some of these press conferences, and it reminds me of a book they made me read in college called Ship of Fools. A bunch of desperate people sailing into disaster. And, I just think that cowards have never beat criminals in a war yet. And the way that you beat criminals is not to be cowards, is to take it directly home. There's nothing that I see that remotely changes my mind or changes what I think about where we are.
But do you believe what you said, though, is different than what you said in that you said he's going to drop out. What you're saying is you seem now resigned to or upset about that basically they have capitulated.
No, I don't. And I think like Senator Patty Murray, who's been in the Senate for over 30 years, and the fact that she came out and said this speaks volumes as opposed to what people say in front of a camera. So I still think I'll stand by my thing that he won't run. But if he does, we're just making a idiotic choice for the future of our country. And I can't help but believe that. And the proof's in the pudding. They're moving states away from us. We're losing. We're not winning. And when we lose, America loses. It's that simple.
We're going to get to the states in the next part of the story. I'm breaking the story up into 2 parts, and I think you'll understand why. But we'll get to the states part in the next part of this story. It's bad when someone like James Carville, who heavily advocated for Joe Biden, remember he spoke out against Bernie Sanders during the 2020 Democrat primary debate. He said, no, he's too far left, too radical. We need to go with someone like Joe Biden, who's right in the center, and he can work on both sides of the aisle. How many of you remember hearing that, like during the Dem primary debates, like Joe Biden can work on both sides of the aisle? I remember hearing that over and over again, but he was one of the people that heavily said we need to go with Joe Biden. And here he is now. James Carville has turned on Joe Biden. And apparently, Senator Bennett, who kind of reminds me of Mr. Mackey from South Park, his voice kind of sounds like that. You don't usually hear much from Senator Bennett, but he was also running for president at one point in 2020 during a Democrat primary, dropped out a little bit earlier on or whatever. But he is vocal about this here as he's confronted outside and actually decided to stop and talk to the supporters. And Senator Bennett is going to tell the reporters that he doesn't think that Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump. Very forthcoming about it.
I don't want to prejudge what they're going to say. We'll see. I think what's on everybody's mind is there a clear path to victory here, and can we honestly say that we're on a path to defeating Donald Trump and holding onto the Senate and holding onto the House of Representatives?
Do you believe that there is one with President Biden on the Democratic ticket?
what I've said is that I think that that I think if things stay as they are, it's likely that Donald Trump will win the election and that we'll lose the Senate and we'll lose the House.
Okay. You guys remember Mr. Mackey on South Park? Okay. Yeah. So here is Senator Bennett telling you that if Joe Biden is on this ticket, the Democratic Party is going to lose to Donald Trump. You know, unlike some others, he is very vocal about it.
Are you watching the press conference tonight? Or
Sorry?
Are you watching the press conference tonight?
Of course.
Or does that matter?
No, yeah, everything matters. Everything matters.
Are you at a decision point here where you might make the move instead of just saying that you think that he'll lose, but that he should withdraw?
This is not a decision for me to make.
But if you called for him to withdraw, that would be a notable thing for you to say.
Let's have I'm looking forward to the conversation we're going to have, and I appreciate that we're going to have this conversation.
What do you wish Biden's not here? Thank you for stopping, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for stopping.
Thank you. Next time I'll get on the right side.
Okay. That's right. That's right, Danny. That's right, Janine. He can't win. Okay. Yeah. So that is Senator Bennett vocal about it. Again, I'm pretty sure Senator Bennett got the approval to do this kind of thing because he knows that he's not going to lose his seat by this, right? Obviously, there are a group of Democrat politicians that have gotten together and they said, we got to get this guy out of here. He is embarrassing us and he's embarrassing himself. There's no way we think this guy's going to beat Donald Trump. So a group of them decided to coalesce and get together. Someone mentioned in the chat that Glenn Greenwald said it's like a coup. That is what it seems like is happening. But then let's step outside of the political space for just a second. Because then there was this statement from George Clooney, who obviously is not a politician, is a celebrity. And you had to just wonder for a second here, is this really coming from George Clooney? Is it really coming from him? Let's go ahead and bring this up here. George Clooney op-ed. I love Joe Biden, but we need a new nominee. Now here comes George Clooney just coming out of nowhere with this statement. That was not a good picture of Biden there. Listen to this. We'll jump to this part here. This is the part that cracks me up. I love Joe Biden as a senator. He loved him as a senator. I think we all remember some of the things Joe Biden said as a senator, some of the things that he did. Crime bill, anyone? As a vice president and as a president, I consider him a friend and I believe in him, believe in his character, believe in his morals. In the last 4 years, he's won many of the battles he's faced. But the one battle he cannot win is the fight against time. None of us can. It's devastating to say, but the Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago at the fundraiser was not the Joe big effing deal Biden of 2010. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at the debate. Let me just say something here. Do you notice what he just said? The Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago. George Clooney hosted a fundraiser for Joe Biden just 3 weeks ago. So he's not like Joe Biden 3 months ago or Joe Biden 3 years ago, just 3 weeks ago. He already sees a difference. He goes on to say here, was he tired? Yes. A cold? Maybe. But our party leaders need to stop telling us that 51 million people didn't see what we just saw. We're also terrified by the prospect of a second Trump term that we've opted to ignore every warning sign. The George Stephanopoulos interview only reinforced what we saw the week before. As Democrats, we collectively hold our breath or turn down the volume whenever we see the president, whom we respect, walk off Air Force One or walk back to a mic to answer an unscripted question. Is it fair to point these things out? It has to be. This is about age, nothing more, but also nothing that can be reversed. We are not going to win in November with this president. There it is, folks, just right out the gate. On top of that, we won't win the House and we're going to lose the Senate. This isn't only my opinion. This is the opinion of every senator and Congress member and governor who I've spoken with in private. Every single one, irrespective of what he or she is saying publicly. So when I read this, the first thing I said to myself is, really, George Clooney? Isn't George Clooney really good friends with Joe Biden and Barack Obama? Obviously, I think we know that Joe Biden wouldn't write this or say this about himself. But I also am smart enough to realize that George Clooney may be the face of this op-ed, but I think the writer and the mind of this op-ed is Barack Obama. Think about it for a second. Why would Barack Obama make himself the face of this statement? That would ruin his legacy. And we all know how much Obama seems to care about his legacy. It also wouldn't be good for him in social political circles, which he is still very much a part of. Probably wouldn't be too great for his kids either, even though they're adults. I believe Barack Obama got George Clooney to write this op-ed. It's just a little too personal. All of the senators that I spoke to, not to say George Clooney doesn't know any senators, but this sounds like Barack Obama. You mean to tell me out of nowhere, this actor just shows up and goes, oh, let me just write this op-ed about da-da-da. I think this is Barack Obama once again working behind the scenes. A way to get his voice out there without showing his face so that you don't tie it to his face. But it sounds just like him. It also reminds me of a time when Joe Biden was running for president in 2020, where Barack Obama told Joe Biden, you don't have to do this, Joe. Even back then, this was not his first choice. Obama knew even in 2020 that Joe Biden wasn't still completely with it. So I believe Obama is behind the George Clooney op-ed. And he put George Clooney up to this, make him the face of it because he's an actor. He's not a politician. So it's not really going to hurt him in the way that it would someone who's a politician or a former politician, particularly someone who's a former president of the United States. So Obama is not going to put his face out in the front. Nice try, Obama. Even Morning Joe didn't fall for this. Even Morning Joe is calling this out. That's when you know you messed up. Listen to this.
Say one thing that we do have to underline here, just so viewers can follow what's going on behind the scenes, is the Biden campaign and many Democratic officials do believe that Barack Obama is quietly working behind the scenes to orchestrate this.
Again, this wasn't George Clooney.
But what do you mean?
It just wasn't. Come on.
What? Who do you think it was? Matt Damon?
It was not Matt Damon.
Who do you think
it was?
It wasn't
Julia Roberts either.
Who do you think it was? You can say the name. You won't melt. It's not Voldemort. Are you saying you think Barack Obama put him up to this?
I think that Barack Obama has a lot of influence, and I think that there's a lot there.
There you go. So again, here's George Clooney, Joe Biden. There's Jennifer. Why'd I call her Jennifer? Julia Roberts. I'm sorry. Damn. And there's Barack Obama, right? All these people are friends. So this is what I was saying. Even Morning Joe can spot it. You see this?
There's a lot there.
There's a lot there.
There is a lot there, Willie.
I'll tell you, there are two people in this picture, and one has had a presidency that was absolutely, undeniably historic.
Yeah. Well, I think you have two people that had extraordinarily
I'm sorry.
presidencies.
Historic in terms of legislative accomplishments.
Well, like you say, and
they're both historic.
And they're both historic. And Barack Obama,
for sure.
Affordable Care Act, George.
Now they're trying to kiss ass. So we'll move on from that. But I think we all know what's really going on here behind the scenes. Now we pivot to Nancy Pelosi. And this is another thing, because I'm going to show you how they're making chess moves behind the scenes too, but actually kind of publicly. But I want to show you this as well. When Nancy Pelosi When she is confronted here and she is asked about whether or not Joe Biden should stay in this race, when you listen to her response, I want you to remember that. Remember, Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker of the House. Listen to what she said.
Let me play first what we heard just now from the former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi this morning about President Biden. Let's listen.
I want him to do whatever he decides to do. And that's the way it is. Whatever he decides, we go with. I think it's really important, and I would hope everyone would join in. Let him deal with this NATO conference. This is a very big deal. Over 30 heads of state are here. He is the host of it, and that means not just hosting, it means orchestrating the discussion and setting the agenda, and he's doing so magnificently. And I've said to everyone, let's just hold off. Whatever you're thinking, either tell somebody privately, but you don't have to put that out on the table until we see how we go this week.
So notice she said, let's see how it goes this week. Nancy Pelosi was not willing to give her unconditional support for Joe Biden to stay in office. Former Speaker of the House. She was, at one point, when she was still Speaker of the House, she was third in line. Heavily backed Joe Biden, constantly defended Joe Biden's presidency, but now Nancy Pelosi is not willing to give Joe Biden a guaranteed yes or support, and let's go for it. So does everybody see how people kind of line up behind the leadership or former leadership? Hakeem Jeffries is saying something different publicly. He still supports Joe Biden, of course. You know, Hakeem is playing the game. He's a careerist. He knows what he's doing. So there's that. But then you have some that are in the middle, like Nancy Pelosi, like, oh, let's just wait and see, but still won't announce support for Joe Biden. And then you have those like Michael Bennet is like, I don't think you're going to beat Trump. He won't win. We're going to lose the House and the Senate.
Jeff, what do you hear in that? I mean, Pelosi saying, I want him to decide and do whatever he decides to do. I mean, we have heard what Joe Biden says he has decided to do, but what do you hear from Speaker Pelosi? And what are you hearing in Michael Bennet coming out publicly to say that he doesn't think Biden can win?
Hey, Kate, good morning. If you unpack what Speaker Pelosi is saying there, it's actually quite interesting. She is saying that hold off. No one should make any proclamations, at least publicly, to the Michael Bennetts and others of the world. But she's also saying, let's see how this week goes. Let's see how the NATO summit goes. Let's see how the rest of the week goes. And that includes, what does polling show? So, Kate, I am told that Democrats really are in a state of disbelief over how this has played out, but particularly they are keeping their eyes on some swing states. What is the data showing this week? So if you listen to what former Speaker Pelosi, who is as close and as sharp of a reader as polls and the dynamic as really anyone in the party, she is saying, let's take a breath and hold off. But what she did not say is try to really quiet the conversation and that Biden is all in. She said it's up to President Biden. So it was pretty extraordinary there. And of course, I'm thinking back now, just watching those comments made just a few minutes ago on Morning Joe, what she said last week. She really framed the conversation around President Biden's performance at the debate, asking publicly, was that an episode or a condition? So I think this is the latest sort of words of wisdom or lessons to her party, saying it's up to President Biden, but hold off for now.
Let's go ahead and stop it there. And I want to bring up another one as well with Nancy Pelosi, because that wasn't the end of it. She was approached in the hallway by a reporter, and I want you to see her response here. Listen to this.
Do you believe that him waiting so long to make this decision could harm the party?
Any comments in the hallway about the fate of our nation? Okay.
Are you concerned whether or not he can win in November?
I think he can.
Do you believe he should run for re-election?
I'm not Am I speaking English to you?
Uh-oh, there goes the cockiness and the attitude coming out there. I'm not, am I speaking English to you? Ooh, there it comes out, right? She's like, oh, I think he can win in November. You think he can win in November, but she was not willing to give her support behind him. She was not willing to say, yes, I support the president. He's our nominee. You're going to see the difference between the way that Nancy Pelosi responded and the way that AOC responded. And I'm going to tell you what I think is happening here.
I'm not going to be making any statements about any of that right now in the hallway.
Do you believe that him?
And that was that. So again, I think it is very telling that Nancy Pelosi was not willing to give her unconditional support behind Joe Biden. Now, AOC, on the other hand, totally different situation. And I want to bring up this video because I want to show you the difference. And then I'm going to explain to you what I think is happening here. Remember what I told you about the political careerists, the people who are just trying to make a career out of this in DC. Listen to this.
What I have to say about this matter. I have spoken to the president over the weekend. I have spoken with him extensively. He made clear then, and he has made clear since, that he is.
Sorry.
I have spoken to the president over the weekend. I have spoken with him extensively. He made clear then, and he has made clear since, that he is in this race. The matter is closed. He had reiterated that this morning. He has reiterated that to the public. Joe Biden is our nominee.
The matter is closed. Joe Biden is our nominee. I want you to compare that to what Nancy Pelosi said when she said, let's see how this week goes.
He is not leaving this race. He is in this race, and I support him. Now, what I think is critically important right now is that we focus on what it takes to win in November.
Everybody see what's happening here, right? You see what's happening here? You see this shift, this dynamic that's happening. So she publicly said she supports Joe Biden. Nancy Pelosi was not willing to do that. Let me let her finish and I'll tell you what I think she's doing.
Because he is running against Donald Trump, who is a man with 34 felony convictions that has committed 34 felony crimes, and not a single Republican has asked for Donald Trump to not be the nominee. I'm here to win on this democracy. I'm here to win in November. And what's critically important is what the president, I believe that the president needs to do, and I have communicated this, what the president and the White House should do in order to make sure that we win in November. And that is making sure that we pivot and working and increasingly commit to the issues that are critically important to working people across this country. How are we going to expand Medicare? How are we going to expand Social Security? How are we going to provide relief to people's rent and more?
Pause. Did everybody hear what she said about Medicare? Let's go back. Listen.
The president and the White House should do in order to make sure that we win in November. And that is making sure that we pivot and working and increasingly commit to the issues that are critically important to working people across this country. How are we going to expand Medicare? How are we?
So once upon a time, it was Medicare for all, and now it is expanding Medicare. Everybody see how that works? I told you it had been quite some time since she had mentioned Medicare for all. I told you that she was moving away, not just her, but members of the squad were moving away from Medicare for all. I told you how they dismissed the activists. Those of us that were at the Medicare for all marches, all of these politicians were contacted for those events. They were all across the country. So notice again how as time went on, she slowly stopped talking about Medicare for all, moved away from it. I don't want to be part of these marches, yada, yada. And now, instead of Medicare for all, it's expanding Medicare. That is not the same thing. I don't want people to be confused by this type of political jargon. Expanding Medicare and Medicare for all are not the same thing. This is not the same woman that ran for office in 2018. This is not the same woman. She is a part of the Democrat establishment, and she's been slowly making her way to that side. And I remember calling this out years ago. What, 3 years ago? 3 years ago, when I was paying attention to the way she was voting on legislation. And people were telling me I was too hard on the squad, that I need to be nicer to them, give them the time, give them a chance. That's what people said to me. I was right about AOC. I saw exactly what she was doing. And now we've gone from Medicare to all to expanded Medicare. Joe Biden is our nominee. That's the end of it, she says.
Expand Social Security. How are we going to provide relief to people's rent and mortgages? And if we can do that and continue our work on student loans, secure a ceasefire, and bring those dollars back into investing in public policy, then that's how we win in November. That's what I'm committed to, and that's what I want to make sure that we
Well, what do you say to members who say they need to see more from the president?
Well, that is all up to their own individual, determination. I respect everyone's opinion, but I'm here to make sure that we win in November, and that's my focus.
And what about young voters? What about
Everybody see what's happening here. This was a chess move by AOC. This was AOC one-upping Nancy Pelosi. You have the former Speaker of the House who was not willing to say, I support Joe Biden and he's our nominee, end of it. But AOC was. I told you years ago that she is the future Nancy Pelosi. So this was AOC who took that moment that she got from the press to show I'm going to go stronger and harder and committed than all the others because she wants to continue her political career. She wants to grow within the party. I predict maybe 2 years from now, she'll run for Senate, then eventually president of the United States. This is a political move, guys. That's what she did. You guys all know Joe's not with it. You guys all know. I saw earlier a small clip of it before I went live. Joe Biden called Vladimir Zelensky. He called him Putin, and he was standing right next to him at the NATO conference. I saw that part. I didn't get to see the rest of it. So does everybody see what's happening here? Now, for those of you wondering, why is it okay for some people to come forward and publicly say that they think Joe Biden should step down? Because the money is moving, because the donors are not wanting to donate to a Biden campaign because they don't think that he can win and they don't like his performance. Obviously, the debate and more since then, the interview as well. It always leads back to the money. The donors control the politicians. The lobbyists control the politicians. So if you can follow that trail, then you'll understand why things are the way they are. Once the donors started speaking out and saying, I don't know if I want to donate to this, I'm going to pull my money and start donating in other places, then it seemed to be okay for people to publicly come forward and say, I think Joe Biden should step down. The donor class controls it all. Now, I just want to show you this because I want a little reminder. Let me copy this. I want you to listen to the conversation that was on CNN earlier about some people supporting Biden and some Democrats choosing not to. Listen to this.
Joe Biden was not progressives' first choice back in 2020. There was a very divisive primary. I mean, Bernie and Biden were going at it up until the end, and AOC had endorsed Bernie in his presidential race. And I think now when we're seeing a lot of moderates and Democrats running in competitive races coming out against Biden now, progressives are taking a step back and saying, Biden was not our first choice. This is not necessarily our mess to clean up. That moderates are the ones who are really, leading this charge, and let's let them kind of take this mantle. But I think bigger than that, progressives have found an ally in Joe Biden, that they have had a great working relationship with him over his first term. They have moved Biden to the left on a number of key policies. I mean, like the child tax credit, getting Biden to be the first president on a picket line. I mean, the Inflation Reduction Act. These are big progressive values and policies that Biden has come around on and really given progressives an ear in the West Wing. So when AOC and Bernie both said they had calls with Biden over the weekend and came out so strong in support, a lot of other progressive offices took note of that and kind of are following this playbook laid out by the two of them.
This goes back to what I said before. People are following Bernie Sanders and AOC's lead, at least those that consider themselves to be progressives. But I got to say this. I have to correct her here. There are no progressives in Congress. Everyone say it with me. There are no progressives in Congress. This phrase that people have created where they say progressive except for Palestine, there's no such thing. A progressive is not progressive except for Palestine. And that is what we have right now. So these people that ran as progressives initially, if you look at the way that they have voted on legislation, you will see that these people are not progressive. It is not progressive to support the Iron Dome. It is not progressive to say that Israel has a right to defend itself. It is not progressive to go against the BDS movement. It is not progressive to go against the railroad workers when they are trying to go on strike. Now you're going against labor. There are no progressives in Congress. Does everybody understand that? I want to be very clear about that. What you now have are people who ran as progressives initially that have just become a part of the establishment Democrats who were there before them. They have followed Democrat leadership and they are doing their will. And the reason why people like AOC and I think Ilhan Omar has also said she's supporting Joe Biden is because they already saw what happened to Jamal Bowman. They want to try to keep their seat because they want to continue their political career. Even though when AOC was running initially, she said she didn't care if she was a one-term congresswoman. Apparently that was not true. Once she got in there, once she saw all the bells and whistles and everything that comes with this gig, she decided she didn't want to give that up. Didn't want to give it up at all. Now, some people say, well, what about Rashida Tlaib? Rashida, I think it was good that she started or advocated for that uncommitted campaign. I think that's great. But even Rashida Tlaib is not sending those people who are uncommitted to a choice of someone who does support the Palestinian people and their fight and their struggle. She's not sending them towards any of the other candidates that are correct on that issue. She still wants them to hold out and wait for Joe Biden to do something and then keep them in the Democratic Party. Now, you got a district right there with you in Dearborn, Michigan, where the people love you. You could leave the Democratic Party today and be an independent and your people will still back you. So why are you still there? Political ambitions. We'll go on a little bit more here.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to set it up that they now have a friend in the White House and they're going to try to stand by him. One also interesting kind of aspect of this. So Adam Smith, one of the congressmen who has called on Biden to step aside, pointed out that while Joe Biden is out there saying, I beat Trump before, that's why I should be here. That's not actually why necessarily he ended up consolidating support for the nomination back in 2020. Let's watch Adam Smith.
Look, the talent in the Democratic Party, this myth that only Joe Biden could have beaten Donald Trump. And I've said this over and over again. Joe Biden was not picked in 2020.
Oh, we'll get back to that. I don't want to bring that up just yet. We'll get back to that. In fact, I think I have that clip. Yeah, that's for the next story. Sorry about that, guys. But the point that I want to make is that it is very obvious what is happening here. Eric, we can go ahead and bring up the second screen. It's very obvious what's happening here. A lot of the moderate Democrats that are coming forward that are saying that they want him to step down, those are people that know they're already safe. They've probably been in Congress for quite some time. And again, they're not going to get rid of all of them. So they did essentially form a coup. I mean, they're not going to get rid of all of these people. There is strength in numbers. But AOC took this as her moment to shine. to basically say, you know what? This is my chance to show the Democratic Party that I can follow their lead and that, I could be a senator and so much more. And the reality is she's showing people, the Democrat leadership, that she knows how to play the game. Nancy Pelosi probably has, another 2 years? Then she'll pave the way for her daughter to come into Congress. She's a future Nancy Pelosi in the making, but I think that Joe Biden is done. I think that op-ed from George Clooney is really from Barack Obama. I think that Joe is done, son. And when we get to the story after this one, you'll see what I'm talking about. We're going to play 270 to win again. I like playing that game. We played it on here before. And then I'm going to show you what else happened with Joe Biden, which is a very telling moment. Yeah. Let's go to some of the comments. Shout out to Ravina for being a member for 12 months. Project 2025 is coming either way. There's no difference between the duopoly. They're for the same agendas. It's why Roe never got codified. Bingo. Thank you so much for that. Savvy, it's a coup, said Glenn Greenwald. Yep. Baseball says Pennsylvania is +8 Trump. I told you guys. Thank you for the super chat, Leprechaun. I was thinking that perhaps this is another strategy, desperate to gather support from voters. Now Biden is anti-establishment. That's an interesting thought there, Leprechaun Alley. It's interesting. Thank you, Larez. Astute Sab. It's Obama. They're all insufferable. You guys remember Scooby-Doo? So there's the Scooby-Doo meme where they're taking the mask off. They always take the mask off of the criminal or whatever. So there's a lot of memes with that. So just imagine if they apprehended George Clooney and then you pull off the mask and it's really Obama. Thank you for the super chat, Robert. The modern house Negroes are taking over. It pays to buck and dance for massa. Can we get some Nat Turners in 2024, please? Hey, a lot of them get corrupted. Thank you, baby Ethernet. Who gives a damn about 34 criminal convictions? Boo. Baby Ethernet saying boo. Thank you, Nexus. It's not AOC, it's AOSI. Interesting. Thank you, Janice. Biden also called Kamala Harris Trump in the press conference he just finished. I'll have to watch the full press conference. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. And thank you for this, baby Ethernet. Biden never wins without being dragged to victory. Well. Let me get the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Sabby, I just got off the Zoom and I had with New York State Attorney General Office addressing the stolen wages that Uber and Lyft has done to us. I was just informed that we will be getting our checks mailed out starting July 22nd. I don't know how much I'll get from both, but Uber, we will get 100% of what is owed plus interest. Lyft, 70% will be sent out in 2 payments, July 22nd and in January. I hope they stole a lot from me. That's good news, though, Roger. Thank you for this as well. However, the intermediary who set this up told me regarding Massachusetts' $32.50 hour minimum wage law would only apply to when you have people in the car, which might mean drivers would get less calls. Sneaky bastards. F it. Terry, Eric, Sab, Dave, Bert, take an Uber and convince the driver to run an initiative to make it easier to form a worker co-op ride-hailing company. Yes, New York State is about to get extra love from President Candida. And thank you for this. The drivers are paid for what is called engaged time, meaning the utilization rate. So if your engaged time is 20 hours, but you had the app on for 40 hours, then you will only get paid for 20 hours. Well, I think that makes sense, Roger, because like some people could just have the app on, but they're not actually working. And thank you for this. And once again, I would like to give everyone thanks for the love and donations y'all have shown me. I'm doing better and waiting on my second car so I can begin working again. Also, ain't no one trying to elect Pelosi 2.0. Thank you for that. All right, guys. If you haven't done so, go ahead and smash that like button. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Yeah. And we're moving on to the next story. Did you know that Ben Shapiro testified in Congress this week? I believe this happened yesterday. Not only did he testify in Congress, which we'll get to in just a second, but he was confronted in Congress before he testified by Code Pink activists. You always got to give it up for Medea Benjamin and the crew because they're always out there doing the damn thing. They seem to be everywhere all the time. I don't know how they do it. I've met them before. I think they're really awesome. But Ben here in this particular clip, he is being confronted by Code Pink about his position on Israel. Listen to this.
How does it feel for you to poison the American public and what you've been perpetuating? Racism, white supremacy, and the genocide that is being carried out on the Palestinian people.
And how does it feel to stand for Hamas? Does that feel good to you? Do you feel good standing in solidarity with a terrorist group that has murdered 1,200
I feel very good
Jews
standing in
and keeps
solidarity
people
with Palestinian people who have been murdered by Israel, by U.S. paid tax dollars and bonds, and you have continued to spew hate.
Hamas should not start a war on behalf of its citizens and then shoot its own
societal
citizens, and you stand for it. Makes you a disgrace
The
to
people
human
of
dignity and
Palestine
human
have been
rights.
occupied.
So do you see what Ben Shapiro did there? Again, this is the typical Zionist playbook. This is the same thing that you see like the IDF and other like Zionists that appear onto Piers Morgan's show, that appear onto corporate media. They do the same thing. Once you start to call out Israel or once you start to call out their actions and their rhetoric, they try to pivot it back to Hamas. They try to pivot it back to that because they don't want to have to answer for the things that they've said and the things that they've done. And Ben Shapiro here is doing the same thing. That's a typical playbook. Listen again.
Poison the American public and what you've been perpetuating. Racism, white supremacy, and the genocide that is being carried out on the Palestinian people.
And how does it feel to stand for Hamas? Does that feel good to you? Do you feel
See what happened? So now he's like, how does it feel to stand for Hamas? Does that feel good to you? So that he doesn't have to answer her questions about the racist rhetoric that's come from his mouth, the things that he said about Palestinian people. To avoid answering for that, he deflects back to Hamas. Notice they all do this. This is what I was telling you, a typical Zionist playbook move. Pivot it back to Hamas. Don't ever answer for what we've said or what we're doing. Deflecting.
good standing in solidarity with a terrorist group that has murdered 1,200
I feel very good
Jews
standing
and
in
keeps
solidarity
people
with
in
Palestinian
tunnels.
people who.
So do you see what he did there? He's lying again. He goes, that has killed 1,200 people. Didn't the report come out the other day about the Hannibal Directive that some of those people were killed by the IDF? So there's that. And that was published from Haaretz. Then he goes in to say he was saying they put people into the ovens. That story has been debunked multiple times. So what they tend to do, and Ben Shapiro is no different, they continue to repeat the stories over and over until people believe it, because it can be truth in repetition. If you continue saying something over and over, people will eventually start to soak it up and believe it. But that story has been debunked multiple times, but he's continuing to express that lie. And you'll see a number of them do this, by the way.
Have been murdered by Israel, by U.S. paid tax dollars and bonds, and you have continued to spew hate.
Hamas should not start a war on behalf of its citizens and then shoot its own citizens. And you.
Again, she's talking about how he has spewed hate, and he talks about, well, Hamas has done this, this, and this to their citizens. This is not about what Hamas has done, which a lot of the things that Ben Shapiro has said have been flat out lies in reference to this situation. What she is talking about is the rhetoric that has come from Ben Shapiro's mouth. And this whole attitude, and I'll tell you, this whole attitude that Ben has, which he can go stuff it somewhere, this whole attitude that like because you have this connection to Israel, that you can't be challenged, that you can't be criticized, that people cannot hold you accountable. This whole I'm better and more holier than thou attitude, it's really getting on my goddamn nerves. It really is. This whole idea that nobody can hold you accountable because of Israel. Nobody else gets this, folks. Nobody else gets this. That is the level that Zionism has got to in that right now. And that was always the plan. That was always the plan. It's just another form of supremacy.
Stand for it makes you a disgrace.
The people
to
in
human dignity
Palestine
and
have
human
been
rights.
occupied for 75 years.
You're the
And the
disgrace.
blood is on the hands of every person in this Congress and every person who watches your propaganda of hate, white supremacy, and racism. You have been poisoning the American public for them to also be complicit in what is going on in Palestine. Shame on you and shame on every one of you who have invited them into this building.
So what's important to note there too, notice once she mentioned the occupation, he ran away. They usually don't like to talk about that. They'll run away or they'll interrupt. Now, why was he there? Ben Shapiro was there. Wait for it. Okay. Because he was testifying in front of Congress about protecting free speech. Protecting free speech. The same guy who him and his buddies at the Daily Wire issued a gag order against Candace Owens. That same guy went to Congress and testified about protecting free speech. Get the fuck out of here. Listen to it.
We're in the midst of a trust crisis in the world of media, which is because so many in the legacy media have lied in order to preserve left-leaning narratives. To take just the most recent example, we were told by the legacy media that President Biden was just fine. For years, anyone who questioned his health and mental fitness was trafficking in cheap fakes. And then President Biden went out and engaged in a full-scale mental collapse on stage in front of hundreds of millions of people. So we can see why Americans, at least Americans who are not Democrats, do not trust the media. The question isn't really why the legacy media have lost Americans' trust. We know that answer. The question is why, despite that loss of trust, the legacy media continue to gain share in the advertising market. And the answer is simple. There is, in fact, an informal pressure system created by Democratic legislators, this White House, legacy media, advertisers, and pseudo-objective brand safety organizations.
Pause. So leave it up to him to make this a partisan issue. And I've explained and I've showed you multiple examples on this show that when it comes to free speech, this is not a partisan issue. The greatest example of the right showing hypocrisy about free speech was everything that happened with Israel. Everything that happened. All those guys on the right that were part of the Daily Wire, what did they do? They all decided to get together and gang up on Candace Owens and get her ass out of there. Then once they got her out of there, they issued a gag order against her and told her that she couldn't talk about it. Ain't that a bitch? Think about that. I have many criticisms of Candace Owens, but I still thought that little shit that they did, that was sneaky and shady. Not cool. But we're going to talk about free speech. He's going to talk about the media, the corporate media, the advertisers. That's all media. That's all corporate media. That's not just liberal media. And notice how Ben is not going to do that. He's going to blame it on the liberal media. It's not just CNN and MSNBC. It's Fox News too. It's the BBC too. It's Sky News too. They're all owned. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street Group. They're shareholders at these networks. So it's all about what the donor class wants. And so the narrative that you see on corporate media is the narrative that the State Department wants and the donor class wants. That's why you always have to question it. And that includes the narrative that came from corporate media about Israel after October 7th. How many times did they have to go back and debunk what they said because they were lying? How many times did independent media get it right where they got it wrong? But according to Ben Shapiro, this has just happened on the Democrat side.
That system guarantees that advertising dollars flow only to left-wing media brands. Let me explain how this works. When a conservative competitor to the legacy media arises, members of that legacy media and their political allies rush to paint such competitors as dangerous. The commentator Kara Swisher of the New York Times, for example, told the head of YouTube that my videos at Daily Wire were a, quote, gateway drug that would lead children, including her own teenage son, to watch neo-Nazi content. Never mind the yarmulke. Elected Democrats pick up that same messaging. In 2017, Senator Dianne Feinstein told lawyers at Facebook, Google, and Twitter, quote, you created these platforms and now they're being misused, and you have to be the ones to do something about it, or we will. Social media companies react to incentive structures, including threats. They've responded by adopting the standards of third-party left-wing informational safety groups like the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, or GARM.
What Ben Shapiro's going to leave out because he likes to talk fast, and by the way, talking fast doesn't mean that you're more intelligent. But what he is going to omit from this conversation is that the Supreme Court, the right-wing Supreme Court, actually approved and backed Biden's administration, allowing the government to tell social media companies what they can and cannot have on their platform. Ben doesn't want to tell you that. I told you about that. I shared that story on the show. He's leaving it out because, again, his job is to keep it partisan. His job is not to have some type of unity across the board. He makes his money by keeping it partisan. But you had a right-wing Supreme Court that backed Joe Biden administration, allowing the government to infiltrate these social media companies and telling them what they can and cannot have on their platform and to suppress information. So that's not just something the Democrats did. The right-wing Supreme Court now approved it. So they agree with it too. Both parties are against free speech.
GARM purportedly sets brand safety standards, objective standards by which advertisers and platforms can supposedly determine just what sort of content ought to be deemed safe for advertising. In reality, GARM acts as a cartel. Its members account for 90% of ad spending in the United States, almost $1 trillion. In other words, if you're not getting ad dollars from GARM members, it's nearly impossible to run an ad-based business. And if you're not following their preferred political narratives, the ones that Kara Swisher and Dianne Feinstein would follow, you will not be deemed brand safe.
You have the same narrative that people have to follow. That's why this is so hypocritical to me, you guys. Let's think about this again. What did the Daily Wire say? You got to be pro-Israel? Who is Ben Shapiro to talk about any network or company having a narrative that is approved and you have to follow that narrative? He's doing the same thing. The same thing. That's why this is laughable to me. I'm surprised they didn't laugh him out of the room.
Business will be throttled. We at Daily Wire have experienced this firsthand. In 2017, after Senator Feinstein made her threats to bring the weight of government down on social media platforms, Daily Wire YouTube channel saw a 1,000% increase in content enforcements over a 2-year period. Since 2021, after Democrat officials further turned up the heat on social media companies, my personal Facebook page has seen an over 80% drop in impressions. Or take Joe Rogan. When Joe said that he had taken ivermectin after getting COVID, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki pressured Spotify to take action, stating, quote, we want every platform to be doing more to call out mis- and disinformation while also uplifting accurate information.
And the Daily Wire did the same thing. And so did Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro and all his Zionist buddies, they all went after people on Twitter. Those of you on Twitter, you saw this probably. They all went after people on Twitter, calling for people to be deplatformed, calling for people to be removed because they were supporting the Palestinian people. Let's all go back and let's remember this. Let's remember how Ben Shapiro and a whole group of people, him, Bill Ackman, a bunch of them all got together and ganged up on the university presidents because they said, oh, you got to be pro-Israel and you let the students have the protest. All of them ganged up on these people demanding that they be removed from their jobs. And now Ben Shapiro is sitting in Congress because it appears it may have happened to his company. I don't see how people, I don't know how people fall for this. I really don't see how people fall for this guy.
Spotify complied, Spotify, of course, works with GARM. So, what are the brand safety standards that GARM uses? The standards begin with inarguable things that we've heard from the other witnesses, like preventing distribution of child sexual abuse material or stopping terrorism. But GARM doesn't draw the line at what is criminal, abusive, or dangerous. Their standards also include restrictions on hate speech, harassment, misinformation, or my personal favorite, insensitive, irresponsible, and harmful treatment of debated, sensitive social issues. Those criteria are highly subjective in theory, and they are purely partisan in practice. For example, last year, Daily Wire host Matt Walsh was fully demonetized on YouTube, a GARM member. Why? For quote-unquote misgendering, which to GARM is to say that men are not women. Perfectly obvious facts now run afoul of GARM's censorship standards. Companies targeted by GARM, like the Daily Wire, Breitbart, Fox News, and so many others, reach hundreds of millions of people with opinions and beliefs long established as within the mainstream of American conservative thought. GARM and its members have no respect for the beliefs of those people. They would like them marginalized or squashed. It's time to stand up for the First Amendment in this Congress. Congress can do so in two ways. First,
time to stand up for the First Amendment. You of all people, are you kidding me? Stand up for the First Amendment, but you must be pro-Israel. Stand up for the First Amendment, but don't you support those Palestinians in Gaza. Stand up for the First Amendment, but don't you dare walk down the street wearing a keffiyeh. Stand up for the First Amendment. There was a guy who was just fired for wearing a Palestinian pin on an airline. Stand up for the First Amendment, but don't you dare wear that Palestinian pin on your uniform. As if these people are supposed to hide and not let people know where they're from or who they are. Stand up for that, Ben. Stand up for the First Amendment, but tell all these university kids what they can and cannot talk about on the goddamn campus. But stand up for the First Amendment. Stand up for the First Amendment, but don't march down the street and protest and yelling the word intifada. Don't protest and say from the river to the sea, but it's okay for Netanyahu to say it. Don't protest and tell people to free Palestine. Stop saying that Palestine ever existed, but stand up for the First Amendment. This is a joke, and more people need to call this out. Because what we have learned over time is that when it comes to Israel, that whole First Amendment bullshit goes right out the window, whether they're on the right or the left.
Congress must investigate the informal and perhaps formal arrangements between censorship cartels like GARM and executive branch agencies. The Daily Wire has already filed a federal lawsuit against the State Department for allegedly doing just this. Second, Congress can itself stop engaging in violation of free speech principles. 2 weeks ago, writing a dissent in Murphy versus Missouri, Justice Alito condemned what he called sophisticated and coercive government campaigns against free speech.
Pause. Congress can stop this. Congress, just a couple of months ago, were trying to pass legislation to change the definition of what it means to be anti-Semitic. You know how dangerous that was? You expect Congress to do this? Oh, but I forget. That's something that Ben would agree with, so that works for him. So he's totally fine with that because that benefits him. Here's the thing again about the censorship, and I've said it before. Whether I agree with the person or not, I never say they should be deplatformed, whether I agree with them or not. Because once you do that, it's only a matter of time before there's someone that you do agree with on the issue and they're deplatformed. Censorship is universal. Censorship doesn't just pick and choose. Oh, I think I'm just going to go after right-wing people today. I mean, so that's a big part of the problem. So if Ben Shapiro was so pro-free speech as he claims, he would have stayed completely out of the rhetoric and everything that was being said during those protests. He would have stayed out of that. The same guy who sat up there and he sang in this video with this other guy, I don't even know who this dude is. He sang in this video with this rapper saying, I don't care if I offend you and facts don't care about your feelings. Apparently that applied to everything except when it came to Zionism, except for when it came to Israel. So people can say whatever they want about me, but you don't hear me on this show calling for people to be deplatformed. Ben Shapiro was literally calling for people to be fired, removed, and deplatformed. But free speech.
Members of this committee have engaged in precisely such campaigns. When Congressman Schiff speaks about targeting social media companies that must be, quote, pulled and dragged into this era of corporate responsibility because they are too tolerant of misinformation, he knows what he is doing. He is participating in a sophisticated coercive campaign against free speech. When Congresswoman Jayapal blames social media for placing America at the, quote, precipice of a democratic crisis and calls on them to target they deem hate groups, she also knows what she is doing. She is participating in a sophisticated coercive campaign against free speech. When Congressman Hank Johnson says, quote, we need a constitutional amendment to allow the legislature to control the so-called free speech rights of corporations, he also knows what he is doing. We all know what these government actors, what some people in this room, are doing. You're using the tacit threat of government action to compel private companies to throttle viewpoints you don't particularly like. The First Amendment was not designed to enable workarounds by elected officials. It was directed at Congress, at you, and you're abdicating your fundamental duty when you exert pressure on private companies to censor speech. Some in this room have been doing just that for years. We in the non-legacy media have been feeling the effects. In the name of the Constitution and in the name of democracy, this should stop.
What a fucking joke. Yes, thank you for this, Edward. Meta is now censoring the word Zionist. Yeah, that is true. I was reading about that the other day. That's how far it has gone. So he's full of shit. And the reality is, folks, I don't know how many times I got to say it, but when it comes to both of these parties, both parties support censorship. It's just a matter of what issues they want to censor. If you're new, come and join the post-duopoly club with me. It's not just me. There's a bunch of others too. My comrades over at Revolutionary Blackout Network, Kit from Hardlands Media. I'm not alone. Not alone. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you, Courtney. My theory is that Obama put up Clooney to be the face of that letter, just like the mega donors will put Obama to denounce Joe Biden in the near future. That's right, Courtney. Thank you, Edward. Biden is Hillary 2.0. I could see that. Thank you, Ugly Rat. 2 years ago, I saw Lauren Boebert make a fiery speech about COVID funds undermining workers in her city. Boebert will defeat AOC for president one day. Wasn't her race very tight? I'm not sure about that. Thank you for the super chat, IH. To highlight the danger situation in Gaza, the Gaza Strip is 25-mile long, 5-mile wide, the most crowded place on earth. This is true. Thank you, Edward. How we know Ben is lying, his mouth is moving. Thank you, Unemployed Scholar. Logic and righteous anger doesn't seem to work on some Zionists, has pointing out to them how petty, silly, and substanceless they are work, ? They are babies crying because they want beachfront property. There you go. Terry Hinton, they suppress Black content creators even more on free speech. Yep, because of some of the things we talk about. The policing content is heavily suppressed. Thank you for the comment, super chat covert. Shapiro equal failed comedian, writer, script writer, sportscaster, husband, human being. Get the picture yet? His musical is The Feces Follies. He was a comedian? Yikes. Wonder who came up with that idea. Thank you, Debs Mo. He is a clown. We all know the truth. I hear you. And thank you, Roger. Oh, come join the post-political party with me. Or come join the post-political party with me, Roger. Okay. We're moving on to the next story. Okay. You're not going to believe this, or maybe you will. I owe an apology. I'm going to say this publicly. I'm woman enough to do this. I can admit when I was wrong. I owe an apology to Cool Blue. After the show on Tuesday, we do an after call-in show, and Cool Blue told me and warned me about what was going to happen to Joe Biden. And there was one state in particular that I disagreed with Cool Blue about. So I apologize, Cool Blue. You were right. I was wrong, because now, according to Politico, let's bring this up on the screen. Biden support slips in deep blue New York. We're a battleground state now. New York, blue New York. is now a battleground state. We're going to play 270 to win. We're going to have some fun. I'll show you some stuff. Some people think that New York State is just New York City. There's an entire upstate. I would say a good amount of those towns, based on what I saw from the last election, a good amount of those towns in upstate New York were red. But we're going to get into why this is happening. Could this have happened with any other person? This didn't happen with Barack Obama. It's happening with Joe Biden. Let's go on. Let's get into the details about why this is happening in New York. Woo, 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 woo. I didn't think it could get any crazier than this, guys. Biden has a new problem, a competitive race in deep blue New York. Elected officials, union leaders, political consultants are panicking over polls showing a steady erosion of Biden's support in a state he won by 23 points 4 years ago. They're so worried they've been trying to convince the Biden team to pour resources into New York to shore up his campaign and boost Democrats running in a half dozen swing districts that could determine control of the House. Biden's aides have not focused on New York, committing no significant resources to a state where they expect the president to easily win all 28 electoral college votes in November. So I want to bring up something here. Some of those politicians that came forward and said that Joe Biden should step down, I believe that's because some of them already saw those internal polls and they started to see, now he's losing support in New York. Wait till I get to the numbers. But the warning signs are impossible to ignore and have been building over the past year. 2 private polls conducted in a swing New York House district and reviewed by Politico, one in September and another in March, found that Donald Trump leading Biden there by 1 point, a virtual tie. And political polls over the last 4 months found Biden's lead had winnowed to just 8 points across New York, an unusually narrow gap in a state where Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1. We're still acting like this is a one-party state, which for pretty much 25 years has been. That's coming from President Mark Levine. I truly believe we're a battleground state now. Biden, whose campaign is in free fall after shambling debate performance last month, is yet to pay attention to the state beyond high dollar fundraisers. So let's go down here. I want to highlight the points that they made here about why this is happening, because I want everyone to pay attention to this, because this should be a lesson for some of the other states as well. So again, my apologies to Cool Blue. Sorry, let me go down here. Just trying to find it. It's a long article, sorry. Misgivings over Democrats, Siena College. I'm just making sure I'm not passing it. Here we go. Some people aren't going to like this, but this is what the polls are showing. Many of the troubles facing Biden in New York stem from a broader problem Democrats in the state have on issues GOP candidates have successfully seized in the last several years. Driven by the flood of migrants into New York City, high taxes, and lingering perceptions of a crime wave, Republicans feel emboldened and believe they will be able to keep all 5 House seats they are contesting this year and come within striking distance of Trump winning the state's 28 electoral votes. Ladies and gentlemen, I was covering this issue months ago, and some of you got mad at me, and I said, don't get mad at me. I said, I'm trying to show you what people are saying in those cities, and nobody wanted to listen except for Roger. He listened to me. I have spoken to particularly African Americans that live in New York City, that live here in Boston, that live in Chicago, the cities where migrants have been brought to. And there have been a number of them that were warning, that were telling people they were not going to support Joe Biden this time around because of what is happening in the cities where they brought the migrants in. I'm not hating on migrant people. Some people assume that. But the fact that there were certain benefits that were given to them that were not given to residents in the city who are working poor. Some of the benefits that were given to migrants that came into New York City, they received more benefits than working poor people in New York City that had SNAP benefits. And I tried to warn people about this. And when I told people, people said, no, Sabby, you're being mean to the people who are coming here. No, I'm not being mean to the people who are coming here. I was showing you what the community was saying and how angered they were. They were town hall meetings about this. So I was trying to warn everybody ahead of time. And here we are. So what they're doing in New York is basically these GOP candidates. That's what they're capitalizing on. This is why they are winning. So here we are in 2024, you guys. Again, I never thought I'd see this. Biden support slips in deep blue New York. We're a battleground state now. A battleground state. To make things worse, Joe Biden is running ads like this. And then he wonders why he doesn't have as much support. Look at this.
The Biden-Harris campaign this morning is out with a new ad hitting Donald Trump on his actions and his comments surrounding Russian President Vladimir Putin and the war in Ukraine.
Our safety is built on agreements like NATO, which has protected us for 75 years. And our security is based on an understanding that we never give comfort to dictators. So why does Donald Trump keep siding with Putin? He said he'd walk away from NATO and gave Putin a green light to attack whoever he wants.
I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want.
He sold out Ukraine to empower Putin. He attacks American intelligence and law enforcement and sides with Putin instead. Because this is who Donald Trump is. A lapdog for a dictator who blames America first. The United States must never be like Putin's Russia. We don't empower dictators. We don't undermine freedom.
My message to President Putin is simple. We will not walk away. We will not bow down. I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
And you never should have approved it, because let me explain something. And this is why he's not doing well as well. The number one issue for the American people is the economy. The polls don't just show that, but when you talk to people in the street, they'll tell you that as well. And I actually have been on ground talking to the people. You ran a pro-war, Russia bad campaign ad. The average working poor and working class American is more concerned about putting food on the table. And considering that the grocery prices are incredibly high, you would think you would be running on the economy or trying to run on what you're going to improve about the economy. You put out this ad, this pro-war ad of you standing up there with NATO allies and saying Trump is friends with Putin. And you think that is going to empower poor people and working class people to come out and vote for you? The majority of people living in poverty are not thinking about Russia. The majority of people that are poor are not no damn Vladimir Putin on their freaking mind. They're too busy working multiple jobs just to pay the rent, to pay the bills. And you are already down in the polls and you're losing in swing states and you just had a horrible debate performance. And this is the campaign ad that you run with. Now, I don't know who's making these damn decisions. But given the fact that a lot of the younger voters are more likely to be anti-war, who in the hell in the Biden campaign thought this was a good idea? When you're losing young people, who's making these decisions? Who are the consultants? This is not 2003. You cannot run on, I'm going to stop Putin. You can't run on pro-war, you dummy. Why do you think Nikki Haley lost? Who came up with this? They should be embarrassed. After everything that's happened, that's what you run on. Younger voters are less likely to be favorable about the military. What you got here? The military. These are the voters you're trying to win back. Younger voters are not in favor of these wars. And a lot of registered independent voters, like myself, are not in favor of these wars. This is your commercial? This is your ad? Trump is friends with Vladimir Putin. I will not stop. Bad idea. And you wonder why. You wonder why. The Democratic Party is still stuck. They never moved forward. So when AOC tells you she supports Obama, she support this. That's why I said there are no progressives in Congress. Just a bunch of warmongers. Killing people abroad, brown people abroad. Now let's play 270 to win. I want to show you something. We've played it before. We're going to have some fun. 270 to win, ladies and gentlemen. Democrats are blue. Republicans are red. We're going to make some changes first. First and foremost, let's turn all the swing states back swing. So I don't know what I did here. Nevada. Weren't you supposed to be that color? Yeah. Same thing with Arizona. I must have played with this earlier already. I think I did. Yeah. Georgia. And Pennsylvania. Michigan. And Wisconsin. And I am not going to touch New Hampshire. Actually, you know what? I might actually do that this year. I'm sorry. Usually I don't touch New Hampshire because New Hampshire has been blue for as long as I can remember. So, but things are different now. So peep this, fam. And I've done this before. There's one change that I'm going to make. So I told you months ago, Arizona will be red. I'm sticking with that. It's a border state. A lot of people in Arizona are complaining about the immigration issue. And by the way, when I say that, it's just the facts. It doesn't mean I dislike immigrants. It's just the facts. People are complaining about that issue. That's a border state. I'm going to give that one to Trump. I'm also going to give Nevada to Donald Trump as well because it borders Arizona. I could see, again, Nevada has never been like what you call a solid blue. And they've been complaining also about the immigration issue as well. We're going to pivot over here to Georgia. I don't think Dems are going to win this again, at least not in 2024. I think that's going to go back red. That one will go to Donald Trump. Now let's come up to the top. We got to make a change. Now that New York is a battleground state, we'll end with New York. Let's come back to that one. I'm going to do something a little risky here. I think I'm going to give Wisconsin to Biden. I'm going to give it a light blue. I think Biden may be able to pick up Wisconsin. Let's come back to Michigan. Pennsylvania, I am going to make it a light. I don't know, man. I have a feeling, and this is going to go back to the rural parts of Pennsylvania, which Trump was able to do pretty well in last time. I have a feeling Pennsylvania might go back red. Now, it wasn't red in 2020, but I have a feeling it may return back to red. I believe Trump won it in 2016, if I remember correctly. So I think that may return back to the red, not because of places like Philadelphia, but I think he may be able to win out that rural base in Pennsylvania again. New Hampshire could possibly go to Trump this time. Don't quote me on New Hampshire, but just again, that's my neighbor to the north. So I I talk to people in New Hampshire, and it seems like more and more of them are leaning that way. Some of them are for RFK. I'm not. And if he's not, or if he has ballot issues there, they've said they're going to vote for Trump. So I'm going to give it a light red. I'm going to this is a risky one, but I think I'm going to give Michigan to Biden. I think he may be able to pull it out. When I looked at the last polls, he might be able to get that one. And then New York. I don't know what to do here. I actually think I'm going to make it blue still, but I think it's going to be a light blue, not a darker blue anymore. This is just my prediction. Now let's see what we have. Okay. Based on what I just did here, Democrats get 247, Republicans get 291. You guys can tell me in the chat if you agree with me here or not. But if I had to make a prediction today, that would be my prediction. And that's based on polling and also word of mouth from people. What you say, Frank? Biden is 100% losing Michigan. I have a feeling he might pull that one out based on the polling, but you could be right there. Joe said Michigan is overwhelmingly anti-Biden. That one will be even worse if I take that one away, right? You said I'm being generous? Anarchist said I'm being generous. Okay. Let's say he doesn't get Michigan. Let's make it a light red. Then that would give the Democrats 232 and the Republicans 306. Either way, based on what I just did, and look, I still kept New York for the Democrats, but I really do believe Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia are going to be red again. What happens if I give him back Pennsylvania? Let's see. Let's say Pennsylvania is a light blue. He still loses. This isn't good. This is what I was trying to tell people. 251, 287 Republicans. So it just doesn't look good for Biden. Now, I could be wrong. We'll play with this again as we get closer to November. I could be wrong, but I just have a feeling. I have a feeling this might hold. At least most of it. We'll come back to it. I'll clip this episode so I can always just come right back to this episode. But when we talk about Joe Biden beating Donald Trump, I just want to remind you why he was chosen. Because it turns out, and we said this back in 2020, he really wasn't chosen to beat Donald Trump. I want you to hear from Representative Adam Smith about this here.
And I've said this over and over again. Joe Biden was not picked in 2020 because he was the only person who could beat Trump. He was picked because he was the only person that could beat Bernie Sanders, rightly or wrongly. And by the way, for the Sanders fans out there, I'm not judging, but that conclusion was made. Okay. Oh my gosh. Coming out of Nevada, Bernie Sanders is going to be the nominee. And people, just like they are now, back then said, yeah, I don't think that's going to work. So they were looking for an alternative. And tip of the hat to Joe Biden, he had the record. 8 great years as vice president.
Everybody hear that? They didn't pick Joe Biden to beat Donald Trump. They picked Joe Biden to beat Bernie Sanders. So this is where we're at now. So they got what they wanted. He was able to beat Bernie Sanders. Isn't that crazy though? Like that's pretty sad. It's sad when you think about it. They just wanted Bernie out. Let's go to some of the comments. All right. Thank you for the super chat, Jay. It takes a lot of class to admit when you're wrong, and you certainly have it. This is why we, your audience, respects you, Sabby. Oh, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I was wrong about New York, guys. Sorry. Anarchist. Yeah, Sabby, the writing's been on the wall for a while. FM, you called that one early, Sabby. I tried to tell people about what was happening in those cities. Thank you for the super chat, Unemployed Scholar. 2 groups of migrants, early wave 1960s to 2000s, struggled or struggling. Later wave, past few years, has been fast-tracked. Interesting. And thank you, Joanne. Speak and preach, Sabby. So based. Love you, Eric T. and Kiva. And I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. And then we'll go to our final story. There's a lot of stories tonight. Good grief. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. I'd argue that it's not entirely Joe. People like myself feel betrayed by New York state legislation. I got to do it to you, Sab. Here's my ex-post Senator Raymond's, the pro-labor progressive, Senator Kristen Gonzalez, the self-described socialist, and Senator Salazar, the self-described Marxist. I had to bark on them. ADOS want Trump for mass deportation and self-deportation. Interesting. I'll check that out later. Thank you, Cool Blue. No apology necessary. I'm sensing 40 plus states like 1980 or 1984 Reagan. You just count the states the losing Democrat managed to hold. Wow. Interesting. And thank you, Roger. I was wrong too, Cool Blue. You got it. And somebody else does not have it. I want to give a shout out to Dave for sending me the statement from DSA. It appears that DSA National Political Committee has decided to withdraw their endorsement of AOC. So this was a shocker around the world. I was not expecting this tweet to get this much engagement. Like, it really went crazy. DSA National Political Committee is withdrawing their endorsement of AOC. This is due to numerous issues addressed below. So I put the little screenshot there and down here, issues included, but we're just going to go ahead and get to the statement from them. What was interesting though, like this got 3.5K likes, like over 195,000 people saw this. Let's go ahead and get into this statement here from Democratic Socialists of America. Status of DSA national endorsement for Representative AOC. On Sunday, June 23rd, the DSA National Political Committee voted to endorse Representative AOC so long as she fulfills the following conditions. So they decided to endorse her on June 23rd. This statement was released July 10th, which was yesterday. Under these conditions, publicly oppose all funding to Israel, including the Iron Dome. Participate regularly in the DSA Federal Socialist in Office Committee. Publicly oppose all criminalization of anti-Zionism, such as bills advancing the iHRA definition, which conflates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. Publicly support BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction to end Israeli settler colonialism. The initial endorsement was considered upon request of the New York City DSA Steering Committee. Earlier this week, the NPC received a request from NYC DSA SC to withdraw the endorsement because it took place after the New York Democratic primary and they did not expect a conditional endorsement or feel it was strategic. Strategic. Because we have not seen, let me highlight this part here. Because we have not seen evidence of AOC meeting these conditions, and at the request of the NYC DSA SC, the NPC is withdrawing our conditional endorsement of Representative AOC, although she will remain endorsed by our New York City chapter. So let's say something here before I get into the details. So, first of all, the New York City chapter should unendorse her as well. But two, the DSA finally did something that they should have done a couple of years ago based on the way that AOC voted on legislation. Now, for some of you, you think, okay, she voted a couple of ways. What's the big deal? The big deal is that as a member of DSA, DSA has pretty strict principles, especially when it comes to Israel, when it comes to war, when it comes to the BDS movement. I remember they were upset with Jamal Bowman a couple of years ago because he wanted to take that trip to Israel. And as DSA, you're not supposed to do that. So I'm glad that they're holding her accountable now. But this could have also been done when they voted against the railroad workers, when AOC voted against the railroad workers. That was AOC turning against labor, which is also one of the principles that DSA holds so dear. In the last several months, thousands of DSA members provided input about the prospect of a national endorsement through town halls, meetings, and engaging in their chapter discussions. And AOC was invited to speak at a member forum. Many members have supported national endorsement while at the same time demanding that AOC demonstrate a higher level of commitment to Palestinian liberation, self-determination, and the immediate end to the heinous genocide in Gaza committed by Israel that aligns with DSA positions and expectations of socialists in office. So this is the part people need to pay attention to: DSA positions and expectations of socialists in office. There were a number of people on Twitter that retweeted my tweet and they were just like, okay, because she didn't do these few things, what's the big deal? The big deal is she's not following the principles of the organization. And she hasn't been doing so for a couple of years. So that is big deal. The second part here, I remember it took her forever to admit it was a genocide. She got pressured by protesters, and that's why she admitted it. And then she decided to do that cringe webinar where she was trying to mix anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. I covered that. That was a horrible idea again. So she has moved further to the right as time has gone on. I showed you a video earlier where she was giving her unconditional support for Joe Biden for 2024. And in that rant that she had, she told you expanding Medicare. So we went from Medicare for all to expanding Medicare. So she's moved further to the right. We recognize that AOC has taken many courageous positions on Palestine, such as co-sponsoring several House resolutions, naming Israel's genocide, as well as opposing House Resolution 894. However, members have raised their concerns regarding a number of her votes, including a vote in favor of House Resolution 888, conflating opposition to Israel's right to exist with anti-Semitism. AOC also co-signed a press release on April 20th, 2024 that supports strengthening the Iron Dome and other defense systems. See, she's sneaky. Let me highlight this. Everybody see this? The Iron Dome and defense systems. Remember I think a year or so ago, she decided to vote present on that. And then she was crying on Nancy Pelosi's shoulder, performance, like that kind of thing. And here we fast forward to 2024 in April, and she this time voted to support, or said in the press release, to strengthen the Iron Dome and other defense system. So again, this goes directly against DSA principles. These are the kind of things that people are not calling out about AOC. They're not paying attention to the way that she's voting. Finally, AOC recently hosted a public panel with leaders from the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, lobbyists for the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. On this panel, anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism were conflated, and boycotting Zionist institutions was condemned. This sponsorship is a deep betrayal to all those who have risked their welfare to fight Israeli apartheid and genocide through political and direct action in recent months and in decades past. So this is DSA saying it was a complete betrayal. I hope more people call this out. A national DSA endorsement comes with a serious commitment to the movement for Palestine and our collective socialist project. We must endorse candidates who enthusiastically seek a relationship with DSA and the National Political Committee, as the highest body of the organization between conventions is responsible for setting the criteria we establish for national endorsements. Chapters have a responsibility to make this clear to their endorsed candidates when applying for a national endorsement. So apparently you have to apply for it. The NPC is committed to ensuring that all of our elected officials are unabashed in their support for Palestinian freedom to build a socialist movement that is capable of defeating capitalism. We must demand more from leaders in our movement. And then there's just a correction here. Correction, she conflated anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Was edited to read on this panel, anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism were conflated after the statement was posted. So this is from DSA, folks. Now, the New York City chapter is still endorsing her. If you're in New York City or if you're a part of that chapter in New York, I highly recommend that you put pressure on them to drop the endorsement as well. But this has been going on for a number of years. And those of us that were pointed it out and were like, guys, AOC is voting along with establishment Democrats. She's going against the DSA policies. We were called haters. This woman took a lot of money from working class people. Grassroots. Running on one thing and doing another thing. And the way that I feel about it, if you're going to take money from working class people, the grassroots, you need to get the damn shit done. If you can't get it done, you need to give them a refund. I think every politician in particular, especially if you're grassroots, because if you're grassroots, you're getting a lot of small dollar donations from working class people. You take that money from those people and you don't fulfill those duties in office, or you vote against those principles, I think you should have to give people a refund. I'd love to see that piece of legislation pass. Have candidates refund all the individual people, the individual donations, if they're not fulfilling their promises. Wow, wow, wow. Skylar said, this all sounds extremely legitimate to me. The DSA was right to withdraw their endorsement. Some say that this is the DSA eating itself, but it's really DSA sticking true to what their ethics are. Yeah, and the other thing too, I want to mention, DSA has lost membership over the past year and a half. They've lost last time I checked, I think it was last year, they lost 10,000 members. Because the squad members weren't doing what they said they were going to do. And so people were just frustrated. They're like, why am I paying dues towards something? And the people who are the poster people for this organization aren't even upholding the principles. We have to remember it was Bernie Sanders that really helped increase membership to DSA. When Bernie Sanders announced his campaign for 2016, their membership shot up. And then when he ran again in 2020, more people joined DSA. Along with AOC and all of them, they brought members to the organization. So for DSA to unendorse her, they know they're probably going to take a hit for this, but that says a lot. But they did it because they got public pressure. Always remember that. Okay. Thank you for the super chat, Snork. She lost me at Mama Bear. I hear you, Snork. I hear you. All right, guys, it is way past my time. I'm sorry, I had a lot of stories tonight. That is it for me. I'll be live again tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. Catch me then. And that's it. All right, guys, you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.